I see Minister Marshall is on, Minister Pintard. Honorable President.
Good morning.
A pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, I'm gonna click start in 5 seconds. Honorable President.
Good morning.
Recording in progress.
Pleasure to be
Just
here.
a note, just allow the attendees
All right, I'm gonna click
30
start
seconds to come in because they'll be
5
tripping in
seconds.
very slowly.
Honorable President. Sure, no problem.
Good morning.
Recording in progress.
Pleasure to be
Just
here.
a note, just allow the attendees
All right, I'm gonna click
30
start
seconds to come in because they'll be
5
tripping in
seconds.
very slowly.
Honorable President. Sure, no problem.
Good morning.
Recording in progress.
Just a note, just allow the attendees
All right, I'm gonna click
30
start
seconds to come in because they'll be
5
tripping in
seconds.
very slowly.
Honorable President. Sure, no problem.
Just a reminder as well to everyone to, because of the languages that we have on this webinar, there is English, Spanish, and French. So please select the appropriate language at the bottom of your window. Thank you. Just a reminder as well to everyone to, because of the languages that we have on this webinar, there is English, Spanish, and French. So please select the appropriate language at the bottom of your window. Thank you. Just a reminder as well to everyone to, because of the languages that we have on this webinar, there is English, Spanish, and French. So please select the appropriate language at the bottom of your window. Thank you. Just a reminder as well to everyone to, because of the languages that we have on this webinar, there is English, Spanish, and French. So please select the appropriate language at the bottom of your window.
Hello, morning.
Morning, Honorable Minister.
Okay, this is not the minister. I'm just sitting in for a minute. He should be here shortly. Good morning. Morning.
Morning. Morning,
Yes,
Honorable
you hearing me?
Minister.
Okay.
We're hearing you loud and clear.
Okay. Minister will be here for a minute. 1 minute or so. Should be here shortly.
Good morning, Sean. Karima here for Dr. Antoine. Should be joining shortly as well.
Morning. We're hearing you loud and clear. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning. 1 minute or so.
Let's say, I want to say an honorable welcome
Good
to
morning, Sean. Karima
everyone
here
present,
for
but in
Dr.
particular, His Excellency
Should be
Dr.
joining shortly as
Mohammed Ifran Ali, President of Guyana.
Morning.
Also the honorable ministers who are here, the heads of agencies and leaders from the CARICOM Secretariat. Today is a special day for us as we are having our regional dialogue leading up to the UN's Food System Summit, which will be in September. This is important for us here in the Caribbean as we, more than any region, have suffered the effects of food security, the need to improve our food system, and the need to feed ourselves. Today is an action-packed day because with a solutions-oriented forum today, more than any region, we have brought on the heavy hitters and the champions of the food system, food security within government, regionally, and civil society who are well represented here today. Without further ado, I'll move straight into our program, and I will ask, we have brought on the HG Joseph Cox, Assistant Secretary General for Trade and Economic Integration from the CARICOM Secretariat, to bring the opening remarks. HG Cox.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Ifran Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa, Minister of Agriculture, Guyana, and Chair of the Special Ministerial Task Force on Food Production and Food Security. Honorable Samantha Marshall, Minister of Agriculture for Antigua and Barbuda and Chairperson. The Honorable Floyd Green, Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries for Jamaica. Honorable Michael Pintard, Minister of Agriculture for the Bahamas. Others distinguished ministers of government, Mr. Didier Trudeau, United Nations Resident Coordinator for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean States. His Excellency Dr. Manuel Otero, Director General of IICA. Dr. Renata Clark, Sub-Regional Coordinator, Caribbean for FAO. Mr. Regis Chapman, Caribbean Head, World Food Program. Other specially invited guests with specific mention of our farming groups, NGOs, the private sector and civil society, my colleagues at the CARICOM Secretariat, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all, good morning. Today's virtual gathering is extremely timely and necessary as the region continues to grapple with the impacts of COVID-19 and the consequent damage to our regional economies. Therefore, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome each of you to this regional dialogue as we prepare for the United Nations Food Systems Summit. Globally, 1 in 9 people go to bed hungry, and approximately 1/3 of the food produced is lost or wasted. Ironically, across the region, our farmers are usually listed among the poorest and the most vulnerable. A cursory look at the data revealed that the region's imports approximately $5 billion in food annually. And if left unabated, this is likely to climb to some $6 billion in a few short years. Recognizing this trajectory, heads of government made a clarion call for deliberate actions to be undertaken using a whole of society approach, setting as a target the reduction in our food import bill by 25% by the year 2025. Nevertheless, we have to acknowledge and find solutions for the market dysfunction that has marred the region's food production over the years. At one level, farm gate prices are depressed, but retail prices to the consumer are high and climbing. At another level, our food producers are not competing on a level playing field, but one where subsidies and other incentives are creating market distortions, including creating an environment for dumping. This, of course, is a scenario where food is being priced below the cost of production. The producers in our region are therefore unable to compete with the markets in the developed world, as there is limited scope, or in most cases, it is infeasible to seek to offer matching subsidies given the state of the economies in our region. However, equally, this represents not a reason for lamentation, but represents truly a call to action, as the region must seek to move our agricultural production up the value chain with greater emphasis on processing and the attendant shift from being primary producers to, of course, going up to increasing the value added. COVID-19, however, has also exposed areas of fragility in our regional food systems to supply chain shocks, vulnerability to international price volatility, and import source supplies concentration. The three thematic areas or pillars of transformation for discussion today integrate seamlessly into an existing body of work being led by the CARICOM Secretariat. There is congruence with our common agricultural policy and our COVID-19 agri-food risk management framework and action plan, to name but just two. The discourse on climate change and Caribbean food systems reinforces the urgency for implementation of the emergency response strategy and action plan for agriculture as on such intervention that can benefit the region and build its climate change resiliency. We are cognizant of the regional government's socioeconomic constraints, which is manifested in terms of growing fiscal deficits, increasing debt to GDP ratios, protracted high unemployment, and unacceptable levels of poverty. Funding and financing the new Caribbean food system cannot therefore be driven solely by public sources, but requires the inclusion of the private sector, development partners, and new lending modalities by multilateral agencies are also a critical aspect of this new strategic pivot. Already, the CARICOM Secretariat has inked an MOU with the CARICOM private sector organization and intends to support member states in fast-tracking the legislative and policy reforms that are necessary to attract and catalyze investments from the private sector to support the regional food system transformation. A survey earlier this year conducted by the World Food Programme, FAO, and CARICOM indicated that approximately 2.7 million people in the region are food insecure. As a secretariat, achieving the Sustainable Development Goal number 2 of zero hunger is embedded in our ongoing work program. A monitoring and evaluation framework for the regional food and nutrition security action plan has been developed and is being rolled out across several member states. Discussions on the benefits of using the parliamentary front against hunger as a vehicle to achieve SDG 2 are far advanced, along with the training and capacity building for member states in conducting the Food Insecurity Experience Skills Survey. Now, as I conclude these opening remarks, I wish to leave a few additional general comments, though related, as an initial deposit and to literally, I suppose, open the batting, as it were, for this regional dialogue. Drawing from a book that we launched a few weeks ago, titled The New Normal, a Post-COVID Primer for Business, the need for the strategic pivot of our business community, particularly the organization of our agricultural industry, is critical. This will entail the launching of new business models, highlighting the role of digital transformation in a people-centric new normal. This is particularly germane as across the region, informality accounts for 40 to 60% of GDP, a significant amount of which emanates from the agri-food sector. That is why I'm buoyed by the fact that integrated into the 3 session topics, the discourse today may benefit with exchanges around digital transformation of the regional food systems, strategies to build our human capital to achieve greater subject matter specialists, and capitalizing on emerging industries. With these few remarks, Chair, it warms my heart to be able to welcome all to this CARICOM regional dialogue as we prepare our united approach ahead of the United Nations Food System Summit. I therefore wish us all a productive and rich dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ASG Cox. Also, colleagues, we also have Mr. Christian Salazar Coleman, and he's the UN Director for the Caribbean Latin American region. We want to welcome him also. We move directly into and ask Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa, Minister of Agriculture, Guyana, and also the Chairman for the recently established Caribbean Food Special Ministerial Task Force for Food Production within the Caribbean region. Minister Mustafa will set the context for us and outline the vision for today accordingly. Minister.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, President of the Republic of Guyana, colleagues, Minister from the Caribbean, Assistant Director, FAO Latin America and the Caribbean, Director General IICA, Caribbean Head, World Food Programme, United Nations Coordinator for Barbados and Eastern Caribbean State, members of Farmers Group, non-governmental organizations and civil societies, technical officers, members of the private sector, public sector, ladies and gentlemen. The Special Ministerial Task Force on Food Production and Food Security is pleased to join the CARICOM Secretariat and Planning Team to be part of the regional dialogue in preparation for the United Nations Food System Summit in September 2021. I wish to thank the World Food Programme, FAO and IICA for their assistance as we seek to develop and transform CARICOM agri-food system. The background of the summit is for UN member states to address how to make food system better able to tackling global hunger and malnutrition, especially in this COVID-19 era. The summit has been labeled a people summit as it opened to extraordinary engagement in every country, from every sector and every constituency. It is also called a solution summit with a focus on action. There are 5 thematic areas and action track that are aligned with the following 3 themes of our dialogue today: climate resilience, financing and funding, food production, and security. Speakers today will go into much details on these action areas to offer game-changing pathways that will benefit our region. We are cognizant that solution pathways will be different for every member state because of our unique features. There may be no one-size-fits-all. However, we can shape the context and arrange the solutions pathway that member states want their food system to be. The agriculture sector has a key role to play in transforming our food system. That is why our heads of government have recognized the value of taking a more holistic view of our food system when our task force was established earlier this year. The region's food system transformation is at the core of our development aspiration. However, there is a far way more to go to adopting a food system approach rather than an individual approach. Over the coming period, the members of the task force will strive to ensure that all activities are geared towards the goal of transforming our agri-food system to be more sustainable, that can contribute to the achievement of its food security and economic goal. We envision a modernized agriculture sector with enhanced incomes, enhanced productivity, value addition, increased market access, and the production of safe and nutritious agriculture commodities that CARICOM will produce for itself and the global market. All of us involved in the summit are contributing because we care deeply about the outcomes that we think transform food system can deliver. Let us all make sure that we do everything within our capacity to ensure that we take the necessary steps towards transformation. Let us all work together to improve the management of every aspect of our food system. We look forward to increased partnership and an increase in innovative solutions. Identifying solutions to address the challenges that exist will bring us closer to realizing the goal of the 2030 agenda. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your attention. I hope that today's deliberation, we can come up with a voice to be reckoned with on this summit so that we can take the message of the Caribbean people seriously and transform the agri-food system in the Caribbean and also the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Those are really enlightening and an encouraging word. And I think the region should take heed and will take heed, because now is the time for us to move forward. Our next speaker is Mr. Christian Salazar, and he's the United Nations Regional Director for the development offices within the Latin America and the Caribbean. He has worked with UNICEF and the German Society for Technical Cooperation and has been instrumental in the UN's work in the region. I now invite Mr. Salazar to present accordingly.
Thank you very much, Jean. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Always good to check. Really a pleasure to be here with such a high-level meeting. President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Honorable Mohamed Irfan Ali, Minister of Agriculture of Guyana and Chair of the Special Ministerial Task Force on Food Production and Food Security, Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa, Minister of Agriculture of Antigua and Barbuda and Chairperson of the OECS Ministers of Agriculture, Honorable Samantha Marshall, other honorable ministers, vice ministers, high-level delegates, representatives of the governments present here, leaders, representatives of CARICOM, IICA, OECS, development partners, dear UN colleagues, representatives of civil society, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. It is really great to be here and participate in the welcoming remarks at today's Food System Summit Dialogue. I'm pleased to do so on behalf of the resident coordinators of the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean of United Nations, as well as on behalf of the United Nations Development Coordination Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. Today's event, as you know, is an important precursor to the Global Food System Summit convened by the UN Secretary General in September of this year. It is an important topic, essential, a topic of survival, of well-being, of quality of life, of environmental protection, of a range of issues. It has food systems do have impact, as we know, on every aspect of human existence. So well-functioning food systems are essential for us all, and they are essential for the Caribbean SIDS, and they are essential for the whole region and the whole world. And if we truly want to build more inclusive and sustainable, a more inclusive and sustainable world in the Caribbean and around the world, this is the topic we must look at. We must safeguard access to safe and nutritious food for everyone. And particularly, of course, from our perspective, we always highlight the importance to always think about the vulnerable person and the at-risk groups as these discussions unfold. The food systems are not only key to the progressive achievement of SDG 2, but of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, we have a responsibility as international community, as national community to act, and it is imperative that we do that now because of several speakers before alluded to this, of the high stakes right now, as we grapple with multiple intersecting crises, including the ongoing pandemic and its deep socioeconomic impact, the eruption of La Soufrière in St. Vincent, for example, and other natural disasters that the Caribbean has faced and will face. Hurricane season is just approaching. These and other factors intensify the vulnerabilities of the regional food system. So it is very timely and very fitting that today's dialogue will bring together the stakeholders that have impact, that have agency on the food systems in the Caribbean at many levels, in the food supply chain, in the food environment, in the political economy. So I very much look forward to today's discussion that will raise pertinent issues and highlight the nexus between all of those topics like the food system relating to climate change, to financing, to food production security, etc. As I mentioned, and I cannot underscore more, this is such a special moment in time now for everyone. And so these dialogues that are taking place now and trying to shape the direction of where the world is going are really have a very special importance, more maybe than in other years or in other occasions. So I do anticipate a rich discourse, also from the interactive stakeholder sessions that will follow today, impactful statements from member states, which will really help us to shape the way toward the global summit. Really all voices on this topic matters. That's why it's really great we have private sector here, with civil society, academia, and that governments, international community, everybody meets here. This is not the only dialogue on this topic. I just, for our region, would like to mention two other related dialogues. First, the Forum of Countries of Latin America and the Caribbean that took place in March this year, where ECLAC and FAO, RLC, convened a high-level side event on Latin America and the Caribbean on the road towards the United Nations Food Systems Summit. And that was an important meeting where it had many important stakeholders for the region, Latin America and the Caribbean. It included a representative from CARICOM's private sector organization, for example. We will have a second regional multi-stakeholder dialogue also in the same vein, late June, probably beginning early July, which will again be organized by ECLAC and colleagues from FAO, along with other UN agencies such as IFAD, ILO, UNCCD, the UNESCO, UNDP will be there, UNEP, WFP, etc. So we really hope that at this later event now, with this chain, including today's dialogue, be able to articulate really a shared regional narrative on the challenges and opportunities for building inclusive, sustainable, and resilient food systems. And this dialogue today will really help to highlight the specific needs of the Caribbean and of SIDS in all of those discussions. It's worth mentioning that ECLAC is working together with other UN regional economic commissions in other parts of the world on a joint policy brief for the summit. This policy brief will highlight actionable points and issues of inter and intra-regional relevance, because with today's international commerce, it's really important that we look at the food systems at local level, national level, and regional level, but also today the world is globalized and the food industries are globalized. So it's also important to look at this inter-regional dimension. Well, in closing, let me assure you that the UN system remains fully committed to support governments in the Caribbean in establishing safe and sustainable food systems and the innovations that the speakers that preceded me have so eloquently alluded to. I wish to thank CARICOM particularly and IICA for their partnership in convening this important dialogue. I wish to thank all participants for their presence today. It's really heartening to see the high level of engagement in today's dialogue. It shows the spirit of solidarity and multilateral collaboration that is truly alive in the Caribbean and that we as United Nations really treasure deeply. Together, we will ensure that the voices and the interests of the Caribbean will be heard loud and clear at the UN Global Food System Summit. Thank you for your attention, and back to you, Sean.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Salazar. I'm a bad host. I should have told members of the audience and persons who have logged in that we do have interpretation services in French and Spanish. There's a little section there with a globe. If you click on it, it will give you the different interpretation rooms, Spanish and French. Also, I want to say hello to our participants who are on Facebook and also YouTube. Welcome, and we're happy to have you. Our next speaker has the privilege of being a part of an organization that has won the Nobel Peace Prize, and that is the World Food Program. The World Food Program has been a tremendous partner with us here within the Caribbean region, and we just want to express our support and our appreciation accordingly. But now I'll invite Mr. Regis Chapman, who is the Regional Director for the Caribbean, to bring remarks. Regis?
Thank you, Sean. Honorable President, honorable ministers, and distinguished guests, with protocol having been established, good morning. For the World Food Program, food systems are ultimately about people. Yes, food systems include everything related to production and distribution, preparation and consumption of food, but it's also about the nutritional, socioeconomic, and environmental results of these activities. The food system we want to see in the Caribbean is one that's efficient and sustainable, and that guarantees food security and nutrition for all people and for future generations. However, the challenges in achieving this food system in the Caribbean, small island developing states are different from other parts of the world. The solutions must therefore also be different. COVID-19 has highlighted the fragility of food systems in the Caribbean. The heavy reliance on imports from North America and Europe, barriers to inter-regional trade, logistical challenges, and vulnerability to natural hazards and economic shocks, among others, inhibit food systems in the Caribbean from becoming sustainable and resilient. While poverty, rather than food insecurity, tends to be the more pressing issue in the Caribbean, the pandemic has also highlighted the fragile food security situation of many households throughout the region. As ASG Cox mentioned, WFP supported the CARICOM Secretariat with a series of COVID-19 food security and livelihood impact surveys. Between April 2020 and February 2021, findings revealed a consistent deterioration of the situation throughout the Caribbean, particularly for those living in or vulnerable to poverty. In short, over this period, despite increased access to markets following the initial periods of restriction, increasing food prices and job or income loss has significantly impacted the most vulnerable. They simply cannot afford to meet their food and nutrition needs, let alone invest in their livelihoods to strengthen their resilience to further shocks. WFP estimates that in April 2020, there were 1.7 million food insecure people in the English-speaking Caribbean, and that rose to 2.7 million in February of this year. This equates to 38% of that population. The longer this current crisis continues, and with the threat of compounding crises, the worse the situation will become. And this is why I say ultimately food systems are about people. There are a few critical areas from the WFP perspective where solutions lie under a unified Caribbean approach. First, in order to strengthen the resilience of food systems, we need resilience in institutions. Further investments are required in disaster risk management at both the regional level through SEDIMA and other CARICOM entities, and at the national level. This should include early warning systems, layered risk financing mechanisms, including weather-related insurance schemes, building on the example of the CRIF. There also needs to be greater access to grant and concessional financing. At the same time, there's a need to continue to strengthen national social protection programs and systems to better serve vulnerable populations in quote unquote normal times, as well as during crises. With more efficient and predictable service delivery, household resilience can be significantly increased. In other words, the food system we want is simply not possible without universal access to food. Secondly, greater emphasis must be placed on linking smallholder farmers to markets, and this must go beyond the low-hanging fruits and make concrete efforts to include the most marginalized farmers, including women and indigenous populations. This should include ecological food systems of small producers and fishers linked to value chains and public procurement programs for homegrown school feeding, amongst others. Such multi-sectoral approaches enhance resilience, support response to shocks, strengthen local economies and livelihoods, and build human capital. Lastly, there needs to be a Caribbean-wide approach to food systems that reduces barriers to trade, addresses the logistical constraints of the region, and transforms current consumption patterns. There must be more incentive to buy locally and within the Caribbean for institutional purchases for the tourism industry and others. And finally, to increase consumption of Caribbean products by Caribbean people for a healthier diet that also strengthens the economy. Caribbean unity is critical in identifying, promoting, and propelling these solutions here in this dialogue for the Global Food Systems Summit, and more importantly, beyond that. And looking beyond this dialogue and the summit, WFP's objectives are to put the furthest behind first, to pave the road from farm to market, to reduce food waste, encourage a sustainable variety of crops, and make nutrition a priority in partnership with governments and regional institutions in the Caribbean. My hope is that this dialogue and the Caribbean's contribution to the Global Summit will serve as a turning point to the region's journey to achieving zero hunger and the other SDGs. So thank you, and I would like to wish you all good luck in the deliberations today.
Thank you very much, Regis. We'll now hear from Dr. Renata Clark, who is the FAO Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean. Dr. Clark?
Thank you, Sean. His Excellency, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, honorable ministers, distinguished colleagues, valued stakeholders, it's my pleasure to be here this morning with you. The UN Food System Dialogues are intended to be broadly inclusive, and this is because the management of food systems and the fate of food systems are everyone's concern. What do we need from our food systems? We need the production of food of adequate quantity and quality to enable health and well-being of growing populations. We need systems of production that are sustainable and do not compromise the ability of future generations to meet their needs. We need food systems that generate opportunities for wealth creation in a way that reduces growing inequalities. There are major signs of dysfunction that are evident in food systems in the Caribbean. We have an aging farming population, as youth do not see farming as a viable means of a satisfying livelihood. We have a growing problem of obesity with spiraling social and economic cost. The cost of healthy diets in the Caribbean put them out of the reach of the poor and the vulnerable. We have unsustainable levels of food imports that also render us vulnerable to supply chain disruption. In the Caribbean, oceans account for over 75% of the territorial space. There are problems with overexploitation of fisheries and IUU fishing. The invasion of macro and microalgae are very tangible signs of the changing ocean environments. We have seawater incursion affecting water resources on land and water runoff from land affecting ocean health. We are all now very much aware of the fragility of ecosystems and the interdependence of human health, animal health, and the environment, the basis of the One Health paradigm. Approaches to promoting sustainable and productive food systems will require careful cross-sectoral analysis and planning, and it will require whole of society awareness and engagement. The UN Food Systems Summit aims at achieving commitment by governments and other stakeholders to make policies and investments that enable the transformation of food systems. The Caribbean is already demonstrating this commitment. We have a ministerial task force already guiding this transformation. A CARICOM head of state is co-chair of the One Health Global Leadership Group on antimicrobial resistance. The countries of the Caribbean cannot, as determined and as resourceful as we are, confront the issue of food system transformation alone. Support is needed from the international community. Agriculture is a very big part of food systems, and FAO is committed to working with countries in the region in building sustainable and inclusive agriculture and food systems. As an international organization, we are well placed to leverage relevant know-how and technologies that can be adapted to transform food systems in the Caribbean. We also have a role, along with our sister agencies, in providing solid analytical support for developing policies that enhance food security, promote equity, and enable sustainable management of natural resources and that build resilience. Finally, the events of the last year have really underlined how interconnected the world is and how important it is to have fair global rules that govern the things of collective interest. The Caribbean needs to fully exploit its opportunities to influence these rules. FAO has a key role in many global governance platforms and mechanisms and can support the more effective engagement of the Caribbean in these. Our challenges as Caribbean SIDS are huge, and our voices in these fora must be powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. We now move to the Director General, Manuel Otero of IICA, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, one of our partners for hosting this event today. Without further ado, I move to the DG. DG?
Thank you and good morning, everyone. His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Her Excellency Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa, Minister of Agriculture in Guyana and Chair of the Special Ministerial Task Force on Food Production and Food Security, Honorable Samantha Marshall, Minister of Agriculture in Antigua and Barbuda and Chairperson of OECS Ministers of Agriculture, Honorable Floyd Green, Minister of Agriculture in Guyana, Honorable Michael Pinter, Minister of Agriculture in Bahamas, Mr. Sean Bach, Program Manager, CARICOM Secretariat and Moderator of today's meeting, Mr. Joseph Cox, Assistant Secretary General, Trade and Economic Integration, CARICOM Secretariat, Mr. Christian Jorge Salazar Volkman, United Nations Regional Director, Mr. Regis Chapman, Caribbean Head of the World Food Program, Dr. Renata Clark, FAO Sub-Regional Office, other heads of delegation, heads of regional and international institutions, representatives of the private sector, academy, civil society, other delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real honor for me to take part of this dialogue as the region prepares to actively participate in the upcoming United Nations Food Systems Summit 2021. Issues such as food security, nutrition, climate change, empowering small farmers, biodiversity, international and regional trade, among others, continue to be pivotal points for discussion as the region moves forward towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The pandemic unleashed early last year and the volcanic eruption affecting more recently St. Vincent and the Grenadines and other Caribbean states have exposed our vulnerability and reinforces the need to transform the Caribbean agriculture sector. Nobody can question the importance of the Caribbean agriculture sector and its impact on the economy and life of the countries that compose it. This fact has led most member states to call for responses that will enable the region to capitalize on this opportunity to transform and reposition the sector. Therefore, dialogues as this and the adoption of a regional position are very important in the process. In his position as the chairman of the Special Ministerial Task Force, Minister Zulfikar Mustafa is moving ahead with the priorities to promoting regional food and nutrition security. In this sense, IICA has already committed to supporting short-term actions through the government-to-government and virtual extension application, as well as a regional strategy for e-agriculture, a regional strategy for the promotion of an incentives regime for use of smart agriculture technology, and a regional policy for the importation of animal products. Minister Mustafa, through your chairmanship, you know that you can keep on counting on IICA's support in the future. IICA has heeded the call of regional movements to support new initiatives, mechanisms, and policies aimed at ensuring the growth of regional economies. We know that for development to occur, the transformation we envision must take place at all levels and involve all actors. In this regard, IICA promotes inter-cooperation approach and looks forward to strengthening its collaboration with CARICOM, OECS, FAO, WFP, European Union, member states, to name a few. His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, who has been appointed lead CARICOM head of government for agriculture, has been at the forefront of supporting innovative solutions that will serve to revitalize the region's agriculture sector, an inspiring vision that is shared by other leaders in the region. Let me extend a special word of thanks to CARICOM Secretariat for coordinating a series of dialogues so as to build consensus and ensure a structured way forward for the agriculture sector. In this regard, I want to publicly thank Ambassador Irwin Larocque for the support and the partnership of the Secretariat with IICA over the years. We are aware that on August 15, 2021, Dr. Carla Barnett will officially assume the role of the new Secretary General of CARICOM Secretariat. Under her leadership, IICA looks forward to building on the foundation laid and to the strengthening of our relationship. I take this opportunity to emphasize that the central strategy for sustainable development should always be one of resilience and inclusivity. I am happy that the regional dialogues will bring together farmers, ranchers, grassroots organizations, public and private sector officials, academia, women and youth, and food system leaders to determine how collectively we can work together, making the vision of the Food System Summit a reality. In closing, I wish to emphasize three key messages that have so far been widely advocated in the food system dialogue facilitated by IICA in the Western Hemisphere. These are, first of all, farmers first. Farmers and ranchers must be at the front and center of the global summit, and they need to be given priority, support, and thanks for all the work they do, not just to feed the world, but also care for the environment. Second, science must be the driving factor for food policy formulation and implementation. And thirdly, agriculture, as any other activity, has some responsibility on greenhouse gas emissions, but this sector is part of the solution to addressing the challenges we are facing. IICA will continue to support this process using all available platforms and avenues, sharing stakeholders' concerns and building consensus as we aim for a regional position at the Food Systems Summit, and ultimately for a more sustainable, productive, resilient, and inclusive transformation of the sector in the future. I thank you.
Thank you, Director General, Dr. Artero. Ladies and gentlemen, we now have the esteemed pleasure of hearing from the Honorable Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados and former chair of the CARICOM, who held and still hold the responsibility for the CARICOM single market and economy within the CARICOM quasi-government. Honorable Prime Minister has sent a pre-recorded message, so we'll now tune in and listen to the message accordingly. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, good morning all. I'm truly delighted to be here this morning as the CARICOM region prepares for the UN Food Security Summit in September. We have so many things we can talk about, but the reality is that our simple focus must be how to put food on the table of our people throughout this region, and how to ensure that we have a stockpile of food for the many crises that are now confronting us. We've already seen what this awful pandemic can do to the disruption of supplies and food globally. In addition, we are 4 days away from the beginning of the hurricane season, which is likely to imperil at least one of our nation states with respect to agricultural production, either through wind or indeed floods. What does this tell us all? That our goal of 25 by 2025 probably needs urgent modification. I trust and pray that our region will accept that we need to expedite the process of producing as much food regionally as we can, and that we need to come together accepting that the true breadbaskets of the region will be Guyana, Suriname, and Belize, but that does not remove from us, the rest of us, the obligation of producing as much food as we can. There are some difficulties that we have to confront. The first and foremost is the potential normal access to cheaper food from outside of the region. And therefore the question as to how we treat to the whole issue of food security, allowing us to anchor our domestic policies and our trade policies, becomes absolutely critical. We cannot afford to only have the need to grow food when there's a crisis. Our farmers need certainty to be able to produce food year-round. It means that there will be some need for some level of protection because they simply cannot withstand the onslaught of cheaper prices from outside where they have the benefit of scale. Unless we confront this frontally, we will put at risk our own national security and the well-being of our citizens. The bottom line is our farmers can only produce consistently if they are given the platform and the environment within which to do so. At the same time, we have too few people who have been schooled in the rudiments of good farming practices and good agricultural practices. We do not have a strong enough research agenda, and it is incomprehensible for me how that can be the case when, as far back as the 19th century, my own country led the world with respect to research in cane breeds as we exploited the reality of cane agriculture as it was then. At the same time as well, we need to be able to infuse technology in all that we do. We use cell phones now and telephones in order to be able to communicate, to do work, to do all kinds of things. And the ability to use technology, whether in the form of drone technology or other forms of technology that have been developed to be able to increase yields while at the same time not imperiling the quality of food that is produced, is absolutely essential. But my friends, technology is expensive, and therefore it is critical that we as a region coordinate to be able to secure the best prices wherever possible. And not only within our region should that collaboration take place, but the FAO and IICA and the World Food Programme can also work with us to ensure that we in this region can protect our people. For at the end of the day, as an island, we are particularly and peculiarly vulnerable. And in those circumstances, it is absolutely essential that that collaboration and cooperation take place, especially when we consider the risk that one of us may have our environment as well as our food production decimated during the course of a hurricane season every year. At the same time, we need to be able to tackle frontally, as my country is now being forced to do, the issue of access to water in order to be able to ensure that our farming practices cannot and will not be hindered negatively. My friends, access to capital, whether at the macro level or the micro level, is absolutely critical. At the macro level, my own government has had to spend millions of dollars for the first time in years on the whole issue of water harvesting to ensure that our farmers have access to water rather than being literally decimated and deprived of a crop because of lack of access to water. Equally, our soils have to be the subject of greater care and attention, and that requires serious investment as well for many of us at a time when there is little fiscal space and little access to concessional resources, regrettably. I hope that we can buttress that access at the macro level with ensuring that there is also availability to affordable capital to our farmers, who very often are at the edge and in many instances undercapitalized and need the assistance wherever possible of cheaper sources of capital, as well as pooling access for micro-leasing, particularly as it relates to equipment and other aspects of technology. President Ali, you are speaking after me. I have every confidence that you are going to make a difference in being able to ensure that we can bring forward our targets from 2025 and ensure that we can reach at least 25% of regional food production being generated by ourselves by 2023. We can start with the 6-week crops and the 12-week crops. We can start with the livestock that is easy to rear. But we must also master the supply and logistics issue, with respect to transport. Unless we settle the transport issue, we are not going to be able to maximize the cooperation in this region. It is against this background, as the lead Prime Minister for the CARICOM Single Market and Single Economy, that I continue to work tirelessly with all parties who are interested in helping us to provide the maritime and the air transport necessary to ensure that our farmers can have access to the largest possible markets that they can, while at the same time ensuring that our people can have access to as much regionally produced food as possible. The last point that I want to make is that not all food is good food, and we need to come to grips with that. Our governments cannot continue to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on chronic non-communicable diseases, or indeed, as I'm now working as co-chair of the One Health Global Initiative on Antimicrobial Resistance, on the reality that we have had an over-reliance on antibiotics, whether as human beings, in our livestock, much of which we import, particularly the poultry sector, and indeed on some of our crops. And ultimately, all of that feeds into our environment. We have to be conscious that just as all growth is not good growth, just as jobless growth is not good growth for our people, similarly, all food is not good food. We have a rich history of using ground provisions and eating a lot of fish and eating things that are generally healthy. But we became sucked in by the glamour and glitz of a world that wants us to eat processed foods and an oversupply of salt and an oversupply of a lot of things that, like fizzy beverages, that are simply not good for our people. And I ask us, as we seek to bring about food security for our people in this region, that we remember, let us do it the right way. In the same way that we understand that all buildings can't be good buildings now, and that we need to have green construction, and we need to have roofs that can withstand hurricanes, we need to have food that can nourish our bodies and reduce the level of expenditure that we are being forced to undertake personally and nationally to fight diabetes, to fight heart attacks, to fight all of the things that regrettably are killing too many of our citizens. My dear friends, if we can come together and settle on a framework to achieve greater levels of food security in this region, then we will have done well by our people. It is not going to happen by serendipity, but it can happen with careful planning and careful support. I end simply by asking IICA, FAO, World Food Programme, our international partners, that we work together, particularly in the provision of small videos that can advise and train and teach many of our small farmers across this region what and how they should proceed to deal with whatever it is they're planting. That level of technical assistance that they can access in a masterclass from you in 2 or 3 minutes will make all the difference as to whether they have a successful crop or whether they will cry and pray for the next crop. Let us work together to make sure that their successful crops will nourish our bodies, and that nourishment of our bodies will not lead to the negatives that we have been trying to fight off, but will give us the right sustenance to live long lives, healthy lives, and to be good with our people as we go forward, recognizing that at the end of the day, without food and water, we have no life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Even in your absence, I think this has been a great words of encouragement for the region and a sobering reminder of the realities that we now exist in. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, I now have the esteemed privilege and honor to introduce our keynote speaker, His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and also the lead head with responsibility for agriculture and food systems development within the CARICOM region. His Excellency has been one of the champions, one of the leaders as it relates to reforming and transforming our regional food systems and our agricultural sector. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, without further ado, let me invite the Honorable President, His Excellency, Dr. Ali, to address us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ministers of agriculture in the region, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, participants, it gives me great honor and privilege to be part of this program this morning. My sister, Prime Minister Motley, in a very frank and precise manner, highlighted the challenges that we face as a region. I would like to express my appreciation to the Secretary General of the Caribbean Community for his kind invitation extended to me to deliver today's address. As a leader in agriculture within the community, it was a request which I could not decline and which I was most delighted to accept. I commend the Secretary General and the Secretariat of the Caribbean Community for hosting this regional food systems dialogue. I would also like to welcome the participation of the FAO, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture, the representative United Nations resident coordinators, and the World Food Program. This event allows the region to synthesize its position in preparation for the United Nations Food Systems Summit as part of the Decade of Action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. But this dialogue has a more important role to play. In respect to our food systems, it allows us to deliberate on strengthening regional food security. It provides an opportunity to access how best we can respond to the threats posed by climate change to our food system. It also allows us to strengthen our resolve to advocate for stridently for financing for regional agriculture development and climate resilience. All three of these thematic areas, food security, climate change, and financing for development, are critical to ensuring that the region's commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals is not undone. The immediate challenge facing our region is the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Its effects are not limited to health and human safety, but extend to all areas of our economy, including our food systems. The pandemic, internal conflicts, climate disruptions, and economic shocks worsened global food insecurity. The 2021 Global Report on Food Crisis estimated that 155 million persons in 55 countries were subject to food crisis in 2020. As of April 2021, the World Food Programme estimates that 296 million people in the 35 countries where it works are without sufficient food, 111 million more people than in April 2020. The Caribbean COVID-19 Food Security and Livelihoods Impact Survey Regional Summary Report of February 2021 reported that the pandemic had widespread effects on livelihoods. The report identified the main factors behind the disruptions as concerns about the outbreak, the ensuring restrictions of movements, and problems with access to and the price of inputs. It estimated a 57% increase in the number of food insecure persons in the region over the past year. The pandemic also resulted in the loss of jobs and incomes, increases in food prices, a fall in food consumption for poorer households, and reduction in their food stocks. The leadership of the Caribbean community has been proactive in responding to the effects of the pandemic, including in respect to our food systems. At the 32nd Intersessional Conference of the Heads of the Government of the Caribbean Community, held in February 2021, a strategy entitled Advancing the CARICOM Agri-Food System Agenda, Prioritizing Regional Food and Nutrition Security was proposed and endorsed. A special ministerial task force on food production and food security was established to follow up and monitor the implementation of the strategy. The task force has since met twice, with key priority areas being addressed to drive the transformation of the agri-food system. These areas include, but are not limited to, 1, the complete removal of all technical barriers to trade, the implementation of an e-agriculture strategy, investments in production, research, and development, measures to promote de-risking of the sector, and the improvement of transport and logistics. The community has therefore been engaged in strengthening regional food systems and regional food security. Even before the outbreak of the pandemic, the Caribbean community had crafted the regional food and nutrition security policy in order, among other things, to ensure stable and sustainable food supplies at all times. The region's high food import bill, estimated at more than $4 billion per annum, and the Caribbean high dependence on food imports leaves it vulnerable to external shocks caused by sudden spikes in food commodity prices, as we are seeing today. The Caribbean must aim at becoming more food secure. This exercise must be sustained and must involve increased production of foods consumed within the region. But it must also entail increased extra-regional trade in agricultural commodities. The dismantling of barriers to the trade in agricultural commodities will enhance regional food security. If the region is to become more food secure, it has to begin to source more of its food needs from within the Caribbean, and this will require the removal of unnecessary non-tariff barriers to intra-regional trade. The region is not short of solutions for improving food security. These solutions are to be found in proposals, reports, studies, and regional strategies. The Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture, for example, has said that if the Caribbean is to achieve the goal of zero hunger, the region's food supply chain has to be redesigned to include food security as well as water and energy, given that agriculture is highly dependent on both water and energy. IICA also correctly pointed to the need for a shift to greater agricultural value-added production. The Jagdeo Initiative had identified 10 key binding constraints to the development of regional agriculture. The solution exists. What is required is the political will and the financing to give effect to what needs to be done to develop the region's food systems. I believe that the time has come and the time is ripe for us to do so. The Caribbean region faces many challenges in developing a competitive agri-food system that can contribute to the achievement of its food security and economic goals. One of these challenges is the region's vulnerability to adverse effects of climate change, rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and other natural disasters. As I speak to you, my country, along with Suriname, is battling floods in various parts of the country. Many of the agricultural lands are underwater. A number of our regions have been subjected to torrential rainfall, which has resulted in flooding, which in turn has led to losses of crops and livestock. Suriname is also affected similarly. The Caribbean region has been named as the second most hazard-prone region within the world, largely owing to its vulnerability and exposure to multiple extreme and frequent hazard events. It is therefore imperative that attention is given to building climate resilience in order to transform the region's agri-food system. Progress towards achieving the SDGs requires a commitment from all member states to affirmative action in respect to climate change. The JAGDEO initiative had identified the key binding constraints to regional agricultural development. Foremost among those constraints was limited financing and new investments in the sector. The initiative proposed the development of a fund to modernize regional agriculture. But financing for regional agriculture cannot be divorced from financing for climate resilience. Environmental threats impact on the region's food systems. Financing for mitigation and adaptation to climate change is more critical today than ever before, and is necessary to protect the region's food systems. The success of our efforts in doing so depend on the degree of international support received, especially in respect to financing for building an agricultural sector that is more resilient. Financing for sustainable development is of equal importance. A few days ago, I made an intervention at a United Nations roundtable on the extractive sectors. I said then that without greater access to financing, efforts by small states to meet their commitments under the Paris Agreement on climate change and the Sustainable Development Agenda will be derailed. The Caribbean must therefore seize the opportunity of the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit to link greater resilience for its food systems with increased access to financing for sustainable development and the environment. It must add its voice to the appeal for the full implementation of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for the Third International Conference on Financing for Development, greater grant-based financing for adaptation, and the establishment of a climate change vulnerability fund, greater ambitions under the national determined contributions of the Paris Agreement on climate change, and the operationalizing of the RED Plus mechanism for trading in carbon credits. As you're aware, food and food systems are central to a number of sustainable development goals. The preservation, protection, and improvement of food systems are therefore pivotal to the achievement of the sustainable development goals. In the Caribbean, if the Caribbean is to remain committed to the SDGs, it will require greater attention be paid to its food systems, especially in terms of ensuring food security, combating the threats posed by climate change, and being able to mobilize financing for climate resilience agriculture. If there has ever been a time for us as CARICOM to act decisively and act as a cohesive unit, it is now, in light of the need to ensure that we do not deviate from our commitment to the SDGs. This dialogue, therefore, is timely and relevant. It prepares us for the United Nations Food Systems Summit, but it also forces us to focus on thematic concerns which are critical to the region's survival. I wish every success to today's deliberations. Just before I close, I wish to go over 10 points to emphasize how important it is that we address these areas before the second multi-stakeholder dialogue. And these are points I covered in the address. The high risk the Caribbean community face in food production opens up questions of crop insurance, but the viability of that itself, because of the high level of risk, is a question. The creation of a vulnerability fund, IICA, and the World Food Program, FAO, has to be our partners in championing this fund that is so critical for the Caribbean region. You have all summarized in every finding that the Caribbean is specifically vulnerable to issues of climate change. You have to help us to champion the establishment of a vulnerability fund. A comparative analysis on our competitive advantages individually and collectively, so we know where our advantage and disadvantage lies and how we can address them together. Commitment to removal of trade impediments, red tape, budget support, our transport and logistics infrastructure and system, an integrated market. I know my sister, Prime Minister Motley, is passionate about the CSME, but we have to work in the region with an integrated market and understand that our self-fulfillment of that market by production, increasing production level, is critical. It must be supported by training, research, and technology. But importantly, we have to educate our regional population, as my sister said, on the values of eating local, the values of eating regionally, the values of utilizing our own products. And we have to take strong measures, anti-dumping measures. We cannot continue to eat third quality or second quality food when we can produce first quality food. We have to be brave. We have to be brave in addressing these issues. We can't walk along the sidelines anymore. We have to confront these issues as a region. And importantly, we all have to commit to doing our bit in relation to climate change. But more importantly, we are perhaps the region that is affected in a worse way in terms of climate-related disasters. And if we assess international financing that comes our way, it leaves much to be desired. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you sincerely. Whilst I wish you every success today, I think we must be different at this conference. We must be bold. We must be questioning. And we must be aggressive in our suggestions and our programs and plans in addressing these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. I've been following the comments on the chat, and persons have been sending comments, and I must say that they're energized, they're enthused, and I take away, and I'd like to share with everyone the message that you said. We must be different, bold, questioning, and aggressive in our suggestion, and I think this is what the region needs. And I just want to thank you, His Excellency, for participating, for giving this message. This message is more than a battle cry, but the region is waking up. The region is seeing the importance of the sector and how important it is for us to move forward as we reform our food system. Thank you much, His Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, we move into our other section of the dialogue. And this is to hear from our regional champions, our ministers of agriculture. And they have been specially selected by the Special Ministerial Task Force. And the background paper that has been developed for this regional dialogue focuses on three main themes: climate change and food system, climate change and the Caribbean food system solutions, the way forward. 2, financing and funding the new Caribbean food system. And 3, food production and food security, a Caribbean imperative. Ladies and gentlemen, I will invite the Honorable Samantha Marshall, Minister of Agriculture for Antigua and Barbuda. She's also the chairperson for the OECS Ministers of Agriculture. And I dare add that she's the only female agricultural minister within the region. And I think that's a plus. And I will just invite her to present and provide comments and thoughts on the thematic area of climate change and a solution for the Caribbean. Honorable Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, let me take the opportunity to recognize and to congratulate His Excellency, Dr. Mohamed Ifran Ali, on an excellent keynote presentation. I also wish to take the opportunity to recognize the Honorable Minister Mustafa, the Minister of Agriculture for Guyana, other colleague ministers. I also wish to recognize, of course, His Excellency, Dr. Manuel Otero, the Director General of IICA, Mr. Regis Chapman, representing the World Food Program. Other members, I'm strapped a bit for time, I believe, and so please forgive me. And I know that we do have a wide audience who is also participating via Facebook. I want to give some brief remarks. I believe I was only given about 15 minutes to comment on this area. But I think that much of what has been said before, you may hear me repeat again. But when we have to address on the topic of climate change and Caribbean food system and solutions and the way forward, I think it is important that we remind ourselves of our commitments as governments and members of the United Nations when we agreed to the Sustainable Development Goals in 2016. And I want to highlight particularly 4 of those goals. Goal number 2, which is to end hunger and achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Goal number 3, to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. And goal number 12, to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Goal number 13, to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. This discussion, I think, Mr. Chair and members, must be held in the context that we are small island developing states. And as you would have heard several speakers before me indicate, we are at major risk. We are highly vulnerable. But we have always had discussions and developed policies related to small island developing states. And I just wish to remind members that at the Barbados Program of Action, it was adopted in 1994, which was further complemented by the Mauritius Strategy of Implementation of 2005 with an outcome document. And it recognized that although we are afflicted by economic difficulties and confronted by development imperatives similar to those of developing countries, generally small island developing states have their own peculiar vulnerabilities and characteristics. SIDS' unique and particular vulnerabilities are highlighted in the Future We Want, which was adopted at the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, which is also known as the Rio +20, that took place in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in June of 2012. And it was highlighted that our small size, remoteness, narrow resource and export base, and exposure to global environmental challenges and external economic shocks, including to a large range of impacts from climate change and potentially more frequent and intense natural disasters. SIDS continues to address those structural and external challenges to achieve their sustainable development. Mr. Chair, members, given our climatic conditions, in particular, our susceptibility to extensive drought conditions, significant changes in topography of land, vulnerabilities to natural disasters, and we all know the hurricane season is upon us. We are in 6 months of safety and 6 months of constant worry and fear of devastation. And now our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines with volcanic activity, which not only affects St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but also the neighboring islands, are real threats. These are real threats to ensuring our sustainable food security and opportunities for economic viability and long-term expansion of our agricultural product. Hence, I have to extend at this time a great thanks to our partners who have so far worked along with us, IICA, CARICOM, FAO, and the World Food Programme, for their support, and especially during our last 15 to 16 months of trying to maneuver our way through the impacts of this devastating pandemic. However, the time has come that we have to now focus on what is innovative and modernized agricultural production. The simple introduction of the Agri-Extension App through the IICA pilot program is a significant achievement here in Antigua and Barbuda for introducing technology to assist our rural farmers in particular within a reduced time frame, with when usually they would have to wait for extended periods with district officers who serve in excess of 60 or more. We also have began to introduce more and do more training in relation to aquaponics and hydroponics. But I have to say that I don't think that our shortage within the OECS or CARICOM is in relation to us developing our policies. Where our shortage lies is in relation to actually putting those policies into effect effectively. And one of the critical areas that we need to begin to focus on, if we are going to accept and embrace innovation and become more resilient and sustainable for productive agriculture and food systems, is that we need to ensure that we develop our human resource capacity to that level to give the necessary support. This we cannot do on our own, and of course we require our partners to make that investment along with us. We also need to ensure that we adopt sustainable agricultural practices for climate change adaptation in agricultural and food systems. we need to be more proactive as opposed to reactive. We need early action to reduce damages and losses in livelihoods, development of risk mitigation and transfer strategies, increased focus on land and soil management, focus on management of marine spaces to include unregulated and illegal fishing. And there is, of course, a great need for creation of climate smart employment. We need to look at the niche areas that we can now develop based upon what we have learned through this pandemic. Mr. Chair and members here, the OECS members are desirous of more technical support for the development and strengthening of key value chains, which are required to improve production efficiency, product quality, and market access, among other benefits to member states. There is a desire for a greater pragmatic approach by the FAO. I would like to indicate that we would have hoped that the FAO office would have been in Barbados, would have been greater facilitating or would have been in a position to greater facilitate member states, whether of OECS or CARICOM, so that they could take on board the unique needs of the small island developing states and the impacts thereon because of our vulnerability. I think that is one of the areas that we need to focus on to ensure, because it is not a one-shoe-fit-all situation. Nonetheless, the OECS is appreciative and supportive of the current efforts with regards to the OECS FAO investment initiative for food and agricultural sector transformation. Whilst this work is very important to the OECS, more importantly, mobilization of the financial and technical resources to implement the investment initiatives being developed is critical for transformation of the regional agricultural sector, which would be by necessity have a renewed focus on food and nutrition security. In closing, we are cognizant of the impact. I'm sure all of us are cognizant now of the impact of climate change on the regional food system. We're even more cognizant of the significant impact that the pandemic has had on our food systems. It is imperative, therefore, that we ensure for future development and constant sustainable development that we scale up climate smart agriculture interventions to protect our agriculture sector. Such technology, of course, as I said before, to include greenhouse, vertical agriculture, hydroponics, aquaponics. We know that cannot be the only thing, but we know that those are a significant part of where we can become more innovative and also produce at a more controlled and sustainable level. On that basis, I would end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for a wonderful presentation. Your words have echoed, your words have hit the spot, and I expect that our region that will move forward accordingly. Without further ado, we move to our next champion, young Minister of Agriculture coming out of Jamaica, who I've had the pleasure of working with in other capacities. As most of our agriculture ministers have been creating waves, have been putting the message forward, I now invite Minister Floyd Green, Honorable Floyd Green, to present to us on the topic, financing and funding the new Caribbean food system. Honorable Minister Green.
Thank you very much, Sir Baugh, and let me take this to just issue a warm morning greetings to all my colleagues across the region, especially the Ministers of Agriculture, I think we have had riveting presentations from not only our regional heads, but also our partners. And I will single out the FAO and IICA for their presentations. And of course, our own Prime Minister of Barbados and the President of Guyana. And I think, Chair, a number of the matters in relation to financing have been truly raised, and I will not try to go over, especially I think in the President's presentation, he did pay a lot of attention to the issue of financing. So I will not traverse some of the road that he has already walked so that we can be good with time, but I will seek to raise some other matters. So let me just say, I truly do welcome this CARICOM regional dialogue, which is in preparation for United Nations Food Systems Summit. We in Jamaica and the region, we support the United Nations Food Systems Summit, and we believe it is truly a timely intervention as it seeks to develop principles to guide governments and other stakeholders looking to leverage their food systems to support the sustainable development goals. It is critical that we embark on, and I love the word the President used, bold new actions to deliver progress on all of the 17 SDGs, each of which relies to some degree on equitable food systems. And I think it's important for us to appreciate that each of the 17 SDGs rely on, to some degree, on the development of equitable food systems. It's also said that the solution will be considered a solutions summit. The summit will be considered a solutions summit. And it will require that we move from talk to action. And I believe that this regional dialogue is also in that vein, that we move from talk to action. I will not go over some of the challenges because I think we are quite aware of the challenges, the high trade costs, the vulnerability to climate change, which I think the minister from Antigua did an excellent presentation on, or environmental and external economic shocks, or weak infrastructure. But clearly, one of the critical elements that holds back our regional food systems, that holds back our national drive towards establishing sustainable food systems, is a lack of modern and creative financing mechanisms. The truth is, the level of financing needed to address the challenges that face our food system is significantly greater than the level of public financing available to the region. And that is the first aspect that we have to just come to grips with. The government will never be able, the governments across the region will never be able to effectively, based on our incomes, effectively fund the transformation of the regional food systems. And as such, while the governments have a critical role to play, our own private sector with their private capital, nationally and regionally, and our international partners must embrace a new approach to financing the Caribbean agri-food system. And I'm going to put forward some points for discussion, suggestion, as we aim to find solutions. I think the first thing that we have to be frank about is that our private sector, especially our financial sector across the region, has to embark on a cultural shift in thinking if our agri-food systems are to truly be sustainable and are to truly be financed. Too many of our regional financial institutions or banks find it too easy to put capital into non-productive areas of activity. Quite frankly, they're much more willing to offer a car loan than to help the farmer or the fisher who has a solid business proposal. So the first thing that we have to do before even looking externally is to transform the thinking of our financial services sector. And I'll speak a little bit about how I believe the Caribbean private sector organization is critical in that regard. But that transformation means developing new financing instruments that foster inclusive models of investment and mobilize funds from diverse sources. Again, we have heard the president speak about establishing a regional fund to transform our agri-systems. I believe a useful model for us to emulate is to look at the Sustainable Agricultural Finance Facility that is used by Brazil. I think it is a model that can be replicated in our region. It provides a line of credit for integrated crop, livestock, forest systems with defined goals for fund mobilization and land cultivation. It's a program that's designed as a 10-year revolving credit facility with lines of credit for each target product being financed. It is an investment fund built on commercial and concessional capital, accompanied by critical policies and programs to strengthen our agricultural sector. So we have already embarked on a journey, where as a region, we've identified the crop lines that we think are critical to ensuring that we reduce our importation limit by 25% by 2025. And I was happy to hear Prime Minister Montley challenge us to move that forward to 2023. So we already have defined crops. What we now need is for the region, and I'm suggesting that the region embark on setting up a sustainable agricultural finance facility, pulling on private capital, using this 10-year revolving credit type approach, using our development banks across the region to finance a facility of this nature. Additionally, I believe our private sector, our Caribbean private sector organization, and our regional institutional partners have to do a little bit more towards effective partnerships to finance agriculture. The CARICOM private sector organization has committed to preparing investment business cases on agri-food opportunities under its proposed 25 by 25 strategy. It is critical that those be done with a matter of alacrity. As you would know, our Caribbean private sector organization includes our manufacturers, distributors, processors, MSMEs, transport and logistic firms, tourism operators, and therefore they present a unique opportunity to follow the value chain approach in looking at financing and to ensure that there is a match between supply and demand. Therefore, we expect that the Caribbean private sector organization will build partnerships with other potential investors in the Caribbean and across other regions to capitalize on investment interests. We already see some progress being made in that regard, but we want to see more of our financial sector now being engaged in providing the financing facilities, such as the Sustainable Agricultural Finance Facility. And another one that I'll put on the table is the Sustainable India Finance Facility, where we can truly leverage the financing across the region to transform our national agricultural food systems. Again, a lot has been said about the need to engage our international partners. I join with everything that has been said regarding access to grant funding, which is critical. But I also believe our international partners need to now join with us to move from the talk of de-risking Caribbean agricultural food systems to establish a system to make it happen. And quite frankly, Chair, we all who sit here know the challenge. We are a highly vulnerable region. Our farmers, our fishers are unable to get insurance policies to protect their crops and livestock. Most of our insurance companies are too small to undertake the risk. They need other insurance, much bigger insurance companies to back the risk that they are willing to take. And I have found some who are willing to take the risk. But the international market has a limited appetite to secure the risk of the Caribbean agricultural sector. If we are to achieve anything from our UN Food Summit, it is that our international partners at the level of the UN must work with our international financial services providers or insurance companies to develop a formula to insure our regional crops and livestock. That is critical. And that is an action that I believe the CARICOM that we must champion so that those insurers who are willing in the region will have the level of support they need to provide insurance schemes that are accessible and affordable. And I know the regional governments are willing to put their money where their mouth is in this regard, but we need that support from our international players. The other area that I think we have debated for a long time, and it is time that we embark on it, is for us to put forward the development of a regional diaspora bond for agriculture. A number of our countries have toyed with the idea of doing a national bond for agriculture. But I believe the conversation and the action would be easier if we approach it from a regional level. We all know that our diaspora have traveled the world and have contributed to making some of the most powerful economies that powerful because of their hard work, sweat, tears, and expertise. A lot of them want to give back to the region in investment type models, but we do not put together the facilities. Why not have a diaspora bond targeted towards agriculture that raises capital to fund our agricultural and development projects that is done on a regional scale? That is another solution that we put forward for consideration. So, Chair, again, I do believe, as has been said before, that a number of the things that is very hard in these regional summits to hear new ideas, because we've been discussing the issues surrounding agriculture for years. What it now requires, as the President of Guyana rightly says, is action. So again, I summarize and conclude by saying, one, the action needed is across our regional financial institutions that operate in our national spaces to have a cultural shift in mindset and to work with the ministries of agriculture, the extension officers, or rural entities to understand how they can provide facilities to finance agriculture. That we want on a regional level, develop something akin to the Brazil Sustainable Agricultural Finance Facility. That we need our international partners, our FAO, our IICA, our UN, to work with us to get these multi-billion financial institutions to provide the sort of de-risking support so our local insurance providers can truly provide accessible and affordable insurance for crop and livestock. And again, we put on the table that it is critical for us to look to developing a regional diaspora bond towards agriculture as a way to generate well-needed funds that will get to our farmers and our fishers. I look forward to the discussions. I'm sure there are a lot more that we can cover. But again, let us pick 3 things that we will not talk about any longer, but that we will get done before 2025. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. You have highlighted some financing and de-risking issues that as a region, as you rightfully said, the time is now, time for action. The talk must end. It's an imperative. I'll move straight into our next champion. That's the Honorable Minister Michael Pintard, Minister of Agriculture from the Bahamas, was also a trailblazer as it relates to regional agriculture, has been with the region, has stayed with the region, has been championing the cause of the region. Mr. Pintard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be a part of this dialogue with you today as we address the concerns of our region's food system, in particular to discuss the topic of food production and security. Possibly the most notable call to action to transform the region's food system was roughly 20 years ago in the adoption of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, further strengthened by the regional food and nutrition policy a decade later. The emphasis on the urgent need for a paradigm shift in the food system have been clearly established. As we are steadfast in conducting the necessary work towards change, I believe that we would accept that in many ways, we are lagging behind as the challenges have outweighed our fervent actions. Have we made progress? Yes. Are we on the right road? In many respects, yes. Are we moving at the pace required for national development and growth that we desire? I think we'd say no. Nevertheless, we've proven over the years that we are a resilient people and excel at adapting to the ever-dynamic changes of our economies, the financial and natural environments. Looking forward to the coming decade, the pressing question is, how can we convert the ideas and solutions discussed here today and in previous forums into tangible actions that can yield sustainable results? There are many answers to that question. Certainly one of them is increased innovation. Leveraging on one of the key words of the Food System Summit, we must consider innovation as not only an aspect relative to new technological products, but additionally as a new methodologies to existing approaches. Over the years, our countries have developed successful tourism industries that have increased domestic investment and attracted foreign direct investment. Countries such as the Bahamas that rely primarily on tourism and financial services have seen that the twin engine of development have served us well in past decades, but that there's a need for some serious structural adjustments. We believe that linkages between the most productive sectors in our Caribbean countries and the main area that we're discussing today, agriculture and marine resources, those linkages are extremely important if we are to grow agriculture contribution to GDP in our respective countries. We believe that at the end of the day, it is to our collective advantage to have increased investment in the blue and green economies, and that we can in fact attract a new and diverse group of entrants. We are seeing in the midst of the pandemic in the Bahamas that non-traditional groups that have concentrated on investment in the tourism sector, financial services sector, are now giving serious consideration to the blue economy and to the green economy. And again, deepening the linkages between the most productive areas of our economy and agriculture and marine resources will be a game winner for many of the countries in our region. As we present possible outcomes that can be adapted in Caribbean countries, I wish to share very briefly some of the work in the Bahamas agriculture investment profile and sector targeting strategy. We believe that a part of this is instructive and quite possibly useful to other countries in the region. This strategy is twofold as it considers domestic and foreign investment. The agriculture investment sector profile aims to give details on the location value for boutique agriculture and marine ventures to attract foreign direct investment. While the sector targeting strategy is meant to be the first step to developing consumer interest by identifying value chains with a demand for investment, we believe that at the end of the day, it's important that residents in each of our economies make a determination that they'd be the primary investors in our own economies, but that we can also form value propositions that can attract international agencies within the region and beyond the region to also partner, whether it is in public-private partnership, that is governments partnering with agencies or individuals overseas, or governments facilitating private groups within our respective economies partnering with groups outside of our region, as well as within the region. In order to realize the potential, we believe, of the agriculture sector through a food import substitution strategy, domestic investors need an appropriate incentive framework to facilitate investment. The implementation of two complementary programs to address both financing and technical assistance can support this. One, facilitation of domestic investment in new technologies. It is on the basis that investment in technologies such as greenhouses, aquaponics, and polytunnels will permit productivity and quality gains, mitigate against diseases and climate risk. And they also improve the overall competitiveness of the sector. The financial instrument utilized is a partial credit guarantee provided through the Small Business Development Center, for example, to help bridge the financing gap by substituting collateral provided by a borrower with partial credit protection provided by the government of the Bahamas as a guarantor. In order to provide seed startup capital for technology and/or business model risk that has not reached mass production and present technology or business model risk. The second part of the strategy that we are employing presently is looking at entrepreneurial technical assistance. In order to mitigate investment risk and to facilitate private sector financing, financing facilitation is combined with technical assistance, especially for projects that involve adopting new technologies in an increasingly sophisticated market. The proposed entrepreneurial technique would be based on the three phases of the business proposals. One, business concept development. Two, approved pre-loan business plans. And three, approved loans. We believe that the Bahamas, much like a number of the countries in the region, have very strong brands. And in the case of the Bahamas, our brand is internationally known for tourism and financial services. With a reorientation of the strategy to attract foreign direct investment to agriculture and the marine sectors, our objective focuses on actively generating 10 to 20 high quality foreign direct prospects to invest over $500,000 US in projects in the industries that use new technologies and support the import substitution strategy. We've already identified, for example, the 77 items or produce that we believe that we could produce cost effectively in a sustainable way at price points that would make sense to the market. And while we identify 10 to 20 high quality foreign direct investment prospects, that does not preclude 30 to 50 additional prospects being developed if the cash is available. The targeting strategy is therefore aimed at companies that have a proven record in crops or technology systems that have been identified in our agriculture sector targeting strategy. The sector targeting strategy approaches a number of foreign direct investment agencies or companies or individuals with a view of attracting them by providing a profile on options that they might invest in. It will tailor policy and strategies to attract investors and put in place financial mechanisms to facilitate increased domestic investment in new technologies, such as the greenhouses or aquaponics, while providing technical assistance to young entrepreneurs. Just in the last budget cycle, we provided $5 million US, for example, to entrepreneurs who were interested in the agriculture and marine resources space. The $5 million geared to provide grants from $1 up to $50,000 was complemented by providing loans that would also augment those particular operations. In other words, we were seeking to create an ecosystem of financing that involved grants, funding, credit, and not just from government agencies, but attracting local financial institutions as well. We also included in that ecosystem non-governmental agencies that also came in, and we shared the vision of what we were seeking to do in terms of financing agri-entrepreneurs, and they too provided blended financing options. We are presently in discussion with a major private sector group that have demonstrated in the midst of the pandemic the ability to raise in excess of $100 million for their particular initiative. Those groups are now looking at the agriculture sector with a view of establishing an agriculture development fund. The fund will take government land to put in a pool, much like a land REIT, and leverage the public land, the expertise that exists in the sector, well-developed profile of potential businesses that can succeed, will leverage all of this and raise additional capital in order to develop not just an infrastructure for agricultural development, but a stronger ecosystem for agriculture development. We support developing not just local bonds, but regional bonds as well. There are a number of creative ways of raising additional money in the agriculture sector. One simple way is to attract those experts from the financial services sector and entice them to work in the green and blue economies by sharing with them the data on the potential benefits of doing so. We have been in dialogue, for example, with the Chamber of Commerce with a view of building the capacity of government workers who help develop business plans, as well as reaching out to members of chambers of commerce with a view of attracting their clientele to the agriculture sector. In the Bahamas, this sector has huge potential, as does the sectors in other countries across the region. We are importing $600 to $650 million US worth of agricultural products and ornamentals on an annual basis. Add to that an additional $400 million that is being spent on value-added foods. Once private sector funding recognizes the potential to earn a return on their investment, they would keenly invest in the sector, as we are presently seeing an uptick in requests for land, a request for farmers registration, increase in the amount of business proposals for both the blue and economy, not just flowing in to government or the regulatory offices from Bahamians, but also from international groups. So to the extent that we could share concrete data of the potential, we believe that we will be able to attract persons who have the means to help finance startups. Lastly, in leaving no one behind, we acknowledge that the role that young professionals play in developing and implementing innovative solutions is extremely important. So young people, as well as women, marginalized groups, it is important to fully integrate them into the development of the new future in the blue and the green economy. It is imperative that during this transition to sustainable food systems, we further support and engage youth and women as true agents of change. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Again, encouraging words, solid solutions, solid proposal. I take away from your presentation, innovation, a clear production strategy, financing entrepreneurs, and finally, youth and women involvement in the agri-food system. I think these are timely. I think the presentation that has been made by our three champion ministers cover the era that this regional dialogue aims to highlight. They have given bold solutions, bold insights, and they have provided a government view that reflects the wider society. And I think it's fitting for us to move into the other segments, which seeks to get a view from our member states and also our civil society, our partner organizations, and so on. I'm gonna do this a little bit different and in no particular order. I'm going to ask their stakeholders to participate and provide their own insights, their own thoughts, their own solutions. And I'm going to start with the CARICOM private sector organization. CPSO, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Sean. Sean, if you just give me a few minutes, Dr. Antoine just stepped away to take a call. So let me just indicate him and then we will come back.
No problem.
So you could go to someone else. Thank you.
One of the things we've ensured to do is to ensure that youth and women are involved in this regional dialogue. And we've had several trailblazers within the region, speaking about agriculture, speaking about our regional food systems. And to that effect, we invite Mr. Alpha Sinian, who is one of the young trailblazers within the region, talking about agriculture, promoting agri-food system. Alpha, proceed.
Thank you very much, Sean. Ladies and gentlemen, all distinguished guests, all protocols being observed, pleasant good morning. I'm Alpha Sinian from Trinidad and Tobago, founder of YFARM. And it's a pleasure to be here this morning to be able to bring greetings on behalf of youth across the region. My work is one that continues to trailblaze where youth engagement is concerned in agriculture, understanding the creative approaches that we must take. So I particularly like the Honorable Minister Motley, Prime Minister Motley, who would have bring down some real practical, down-to-earth suggestions. I mean, we all know it's about solutions this morning and not too much of problems, but agriculture is something practical, and I think agriculture solutions desire practical responses and practical solutions as well. So one I will just make mention of is the fact of make videos to teach farmers, and I found it to be so simple because that's what we do as well, make videos to teach farmers. And what I also want to add is that I think we as agriculture people and agriculture ministers and participants, we somewhat only address agriculture people. We somewhat only address agricultural farmers. And I think this is the conversation, food systems summit, and someone said it nicely as well, that the food systems, it requires people intervention. So I think we have to make certain reach to people, to the nation, not only farmers. And I feel as though this is something in the region which we have been lacking for quite some number of years, where we only focus on our agricultural people within our circle. And food security, food and nutrition security, it requires everyone to be able to be part of this food system, because in most cases, they are the consumers, they are the buyers, they are the ones that are going to eat the food that whatever comes in from foreign or local, or make that decision, and they dictate as well what farmers grow and what they don't grow. So people must be trained to not waste food, to consume local food, to eat healthier food, to plant one tree and eat for free. These are some of the things that we actually practice. And I always say we cannot wait until university to teach the youth about food security. We cannot wait until they get a PhD to learn about climate change adaptability. This must be information that must be made available to children in primary school. What is wrong with children in primary school understanding food security? If we say this is such a regional crisis and it's such a problem, then we must introduce that word and allow them to be able to see how they can contribute towards it. And finally, I will quickly take the time to share about our superheroes that we have developed. And in doing just that, adding to what Prime Minister Motley would have said as well, we utilize agricultural, educational, entertainment via our educational programs, agri-edutainment. Being able to create these superhero characters, create stories, create comic books, create videos and poetry and theater in schools that really allows our program to be able to reach the younger generation so that they can understand the role that they have to play in food and nutrition security. I wouldn't take much time again, but I will just add and say that, this conversation is one that, we must turn it into action. We must turn it into practicality and reach that farmer on the ground who sometimes is even in poverty. And how could somebody who's growing food be in poverty? It sounds like an oxymoron, right? So we must change our ways, change our thinking, come down to these practical solutions Our agreement is there for the entire region. You can learn from us, and I'm willing to share and be able to really better our food system. So thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Alpha. I'm gonna call on Miss Tamisha Lee who's with us, and she's from the Rural Women's Network. And I think this is important, as Minister Pinto had said before. Youth and women involvement is critical. So Ms. Lee, the floor is yours. She seemed to be having some technical difficulty at this point in time. Is the CPSO ready for us?
Sean, how are you? And good morning to all the colleagues, and good to be here with you. Sean, so to you and our colleagues in attendance, you know that we have been working on the two first business cases in the 25 by 25 plan that's been revised since COVID to 25 by 23. We have stuck with the original mandate. I think what we've been finding is fairly interesting, because I think it's going to challenge the way in which we have looked at the opportunities in terms of the way that traditionally we have looked at things strictly in terms of perhaps LDCs, MDCs in some cases, and the way that we have oriented how we're going to spread these benefits across the community, but also in terms of the models, the business models that we've used too. So the business models that we're finding that work, interestingly, are business models that hitherto would not have had an ideal mix between the sized enterprises. Cost was also a factor in terms of accessing an innovation. And by virtue of the fact that innovations brought a lot of the new technologies down in terms of the cost of those technologies initially, by virtue of the fact that we now have technologies that are appropriately sized for some of the enterprises and some of the opportunities that exist too. And also by virtue of the fact that we're now thinking about the business model differently, the way in which we thought about the business models before. Before, there were models that were really that are geared towards either producing within the state, for the state itself, and of course, exporting to neighboring states with market sizes that were fairly similar. We're now finding that there are absolutely no good reasons left why we shouldn't be locating opportunities in small states for circulation and seizing of opportunities throughout the entire CSME, including big states. We're finding that as we've now talked about how we deal with the whole value chain, because we've now been talking about building out the value chain, that there are opportunities in the chain itself at a raw material level in some instances, but also at a higher value-added products level that are really amenable to small enterprises, micro and small enterprises, and location in small states, which target markets in the larger Caribbean countries. In this case, I do use Caribbean because I mean outside of CARICOM as well, and also which target diaspora markets. So I think what we're finding, we've heard a lot today about some of the challenges and where we locate things. I think for me, the takeaway of the last 5 years, and I think we're starting to see that in some of the work that we're doing, is that you can literally now locate many operations in many different places. So your choice set becomes a lot wider. And I think we can make a lot of things happen in terms of successful outcomes because the technology enables it. And I think we're only finding now that we're going to be competing on other factors. First, the market, quality of product, price always remains a factor. But I think it's a dynamic process of change that we're engaged in. And we're now starting to challenge for what we used to call the snow and ice products. And what do I mean by this? We used to laugh about the snow and ice products to have been things like strawberries and apples and so on. And we used to basically, when we did our analysis, take those off of the top because we couldn't produce snow and ice products, as we call them, because of our climate. We're now finding that with the technology, there are even snow and ice opportunities, particularly in the berries, that we're now starting to tap into. And this has far-reaching implications, even as we now start talking about reform of the rules of origin and the CT. We would call these products previously non-competing, but we're now finding reasons to and opportunities for us to think really hard about how we classify those products and how we enable them so that when the private sector is ready to invest in these opportunities, we can move the classifications fairly easily to give them the easement that they want so that the ventures can become more profitable. What I'm saying to you is simply this. There's a lot of things happening at this time. And I think this is really a time when the community is engaged and we are engaged with the community being the CPSO. I think we've not had reform in many of our rules for nearly 30 years. And we've now had technology, innovation, and diffusion taking place at this time. And I think what all of this means is that if we are diligent and we are dutiful and we really are prepared to think outside of the box, because a lot of this will require thinking outside of the box, that we can have an exciting, dynamic agri-food system that produces good, wholesome food to our population and does in fact make a significant dent on employment with a lot of youth participation that we're seeing already, and with tremendously positive impacts on bringing down the incidence of non-communicable diseases, because we are now going to be able to produce a lot of these things at a scale and at a cost that the population can afford. So the CPSO is really, really happy to be here with you. And we engage with you. And of course, we're looking to try to get those 2 business investment case studies done at the soonest opportunity, but we are hoping that by the time we have another engagement such as this one, we're going to be speaking definitively to some concrete results. Let me thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Antoine. It's encouraging to hear that the private sector is on board, as the messages that came through from all our leaders and our champions, private sector, private sector, private sector. I note that there are persons who have their hands raised. We have noted. We will come to you in a bit. So I'm asking you to see with us. We will get to you in short order. But for now, I'll ask Miss Megan from Barbados, who is Theobalds, who is also one of our CARICOM youth ambassadors, who reached out to us and said that as youth ambassadors, this is something they'd want to participate in. So I give the floor to Megan accordingly.
Oh, sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. With protocol having been established, my name is Megan, and I am the CARICOM Youth Ambassador to Barbados. We've all experienced the impact of the ongoing coronavirus, but arguably, youth have been hit particularly hard by the socioeconomic fallout of COVID-19. According to ECLAC, 30% of youth have had a negative impact in their employment status due to the pandemic. Furthermore, young people face higher unemployment rates in comparison to the general population. Fortunately, this forum provides an opportunity to change course and create a space for young people to meaningfully contribute to the overall economic and sustainable development of our region. If we want to effectively transform our food system, we need to ensure the new system integrates a demographic that not only makes up 63% of the CARICOM population, but is also innovative, resilient, and eager to make an impact in society. Firstly, the current perception of the agricultural sector by many young people is that it is outdated and physically and mentally taxing with little to no reward. While the newer, more technology-based styles of agriculture, such as hydroponics and aquaponics, attract the youth, the reality is that commercially, they're extremely expensive to set up. Therefore, it would be difficult for young aspiring farmers who may want to participate to gain a foothold. Access to affordable technology is key to revolutionizing the food system and increasing youth participation. Secondly, governments must be applauded for their efforts to provide support to young farmers and business owners in the agriculture sector in the form of land ownership and financing. However, there is still concern about access to financing and access to good, arable land. Furthermore, the government-supported process can be arduous, time-consuming, and frustrating, which can be a deterrent for those seeking entry. Young people thrive on efficiency. Therefore, streamlining the process with the use of effective technology is one way of increasing youth participation. Lastly, young people must be given the opportunity to contribute to the global discussion of the food system, and their priorities should be considered by respective key players. While youth contributions are essential, forming regional youth coalitions to bring together their knowledge and voices will be paramount to successful transformation. In conclusion, we can all agree our food systems need significant reform. I would say, however, that by focusing on the needs of the most incapacitated members of the Caribbean, the entire region will flourish. Thank you.
Thank you much, Megan. The voice of the youth is important, and I think we have taken enough notes, and we make sure that the comments and the suggestions are taken forward. Equally, health and agriculture, health and food is important, and it's something that must not be lost. And we're going to ask Ms. Marsha Hutton from the Healthy Caribbean Coalition to provide thoughts as relates to health and food and health and agriculture, and by extension, our agricultural food systems. Ms. Hutton, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, all. With all protocols being observed, thank you for the opportunity to deliver brief comments on behalf of the HCC. The Healthy Caribbean Coalition is the only non-communicable disease or NCD-focused civil society alliance in the Caribbean. The COVID-19 pandemic has shone a spotlight on our vulnerabilities, especially as small developing states, already grappling with significant health challenges, namely the twin epidemics of obesity and NCDs, which increasingly threaten human development and security in this region. The single greatest risk factor for obesity and NCDs is unhealthy diets, diets dominated by ultra-processed foods high in sugars, fats, and sodium. Caribbean diets have transitioned away from locally grown healthy foods to imported, energy-dense, nutrient-poor foods. We will most certainly face an ever-deepening crisis of NCDs, condemning entire generations to ill health and early death if urgent action is not taken to fundamentally change the way we eat. To achieve this, we must reshape our food systems. Our food systems encourage overconsumption of unhealthy foods while discouraging consumption of healthy, nutritious options. Significant and complex challenges in the food supply chain, coupled with weak regulation of the ultra-processed food and beverage sector, and exacerbated by more frequent natural disasters, has created unhealthy, inequitable food environments. The Healthy Caribbean Coalition and our 100+ members urge CARICOM political leadership, regional institutions and agencies, civil society actors, and private sector partners to support us in our calls for the accelerated implementation of evidence-based healthy food policies, such as taxation of sweetened beverages, regulation of the sale and marketing of unhealthy foods and beverages to children, and the introduction of mandatory octagonal fronted package nutrition warning labeling. Policies which can transform our food environments, ensuring just, equitable, and sustainable access to nutritious food for all Caribbean people. I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. It's important now that we hear from the rural women and have their perspective, in particular as it relates to the food system, as we know that women play a significant role in our regional food systems, from production, marketing, straight through the value chain. So we'll call on Ms. Tamisha Lee, who is the president of Jamaica and Rural Women Network, to give us some comments, frank, open comments on as we move forward. Ms. Lee, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. All protocols duly acknowledged. And I want to personally recognize my minister, Honorable Floyd Green, my minister in whom I am well pleased. Thank you so very much for the opportunity to speak at this very timely food system summit. The type of food system we want to see in the Caribbean is one that leaves no one behind. And when I say no one behind, I speak specifically about our rural women across the Caribbean. Our rural women play a critical role in all phases of the value chain. They must be involved in all stages, not just at the back end. We're not targets, we are solution providers. We have been talking for years. Now is the time for action. Now is the time for a total transformation of our food system in the Caribbean. And that can only happen with the full and total participation of our rural women. As one of the speakers said before, we have the solutions. We know what the solutions are in the Caribbean. We need to invest more in education. We need to invest in research. Government and private sector need to partner in order for us to have a fairer, diverse, and sustainable food system. Rural women has been tried and tested over the years, and time again, we have proven our resilience. So I'm not going to be repeating what has been said before by my colleagues, but it is important for us to be involved in the total planning and implementation of our food system, and we ought not to be left behind. Thank you so very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you much. Thank you much. It's important that our farmers' organizations are also give their voices, and we've invited Mr. Errington Thompson, who's from ACARI, which is the Regional Farmers Association and Organization, and we'd invite him to provide their view, realistic solutions, as hard-hitting as they can be, as we prepare accordingly. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Protocol having been established, I just want to say that farmers are very pleased to be a part of this summit, and we're happy to lend support wherever we can for whatever is going to be done. We realize that a lot of answers have been expounded today. Many people have given many solutions to the problems. We know what the problems are, and we're happy to hear that there are solutions. And we know that the next step must be action. However, what farmers would like to see is an opportunity for us to be a part of everything that is happening. And so we seek to be involved at every level. But we also would like to caution that although we speak about the region, we must consider that every country in the region have different needs and they should be treated differently. So we'd like to see an inventory or a census being done so that we know what we have. Every aspect of food and agriculture should be documented so that we can tell by moment glance what each country needs to fulfill its need within the region. We also would like to see that rather than talk about just a broad brush approach, we need a comprehensive food production system, something that will utilize climate smart agriculture, permaculture, digitalization, All of these things will help us to achieve food security, but a number of solutions have been given. The one thing that stands out in my mind as I listen to everybody is, rather than in the global world look towards debt extension, perhaps our lenders should be considering debt forgiveness. I thank you.
Thank you, Sir Thompson. That's a new entrance that I think is worth looking at from the farmer's point of view. I'll ask Mr. Vassie Stewart from CABA, which is Caribbean Agribusiness Association, from a processor's point of view, who are critical in the food systems, to give his thoughts on behalf of the association. Mr. Stewart?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. Stewart, you're coming a little low. I'm not sure what's happening. Could you probably turn the volume?
Are you hearing me more clearly?
That's better. That's better.
Excellent. So first I wanted to just focus a bit on the presentations by Minister Motley, the presentation from Minister Green, Minister Pintard, and President Ephraim Ali, because what they did was to identify what I consider to be the fundamental issues. Primarily the points made by President Ephraim Ali. We identify the fundamental issues as being one of political will and the second of being of financing. Both Minister Green and Minister Pintard looked at how we can actually provide financing by creating a number of funds, some to be funded by government, and there was a request for the development agencies to participate. So we know what the problems are. We've pontificated them over the last perhaps 30 years. But we have not put in place a consistent approach to how we fund agribusiness in the region, whether it's at the primary level or the value-added level. We have been making a request over the last 5 years in particular for government to implement appropriate trade policy to fund R&D in the region. We are not going to achieve the targets we have set for reducing food imports by 25%, whether it's 3 or 5 years, if we don't invest in R&D for new product development. Most of the food that comes into the region are value-added products. We do not now have the infrastructure or some of the technical capacity to display these. Even where we have the capacity to produce raw material, and I'm saying there are cases, for example, in the case of cassava, where we can produce raw material now at a cost that is competitive with wheat. There's a need for funds for investment. So my question to us as a group is, how do we fund whether investment at the private sector level or the public sector level? And we think that, one, there's a need for policy that will unlock the funds that are in the bank sitting down right across the region, billions of dollars, earning very little interest, but which both the private sector at the higher level, large companies, as well as small private sector partners, are unwilling to make the investment because, one, there's a level of risk, market risk. We cannot, and Prime Minister Motley made a very strong appeal on this. How do we put in place the policies that will at least protect those products that we have identified for priority development? Is a 40% CET adequate to attract investment on the private sector level? Much was said about the fact that the PSO, the private sector organization, has been asked to make investment. Ask yourselves, how much investment has been made since the discussion started maybe 3 years ago, and why not? And I would argue that the policies are not strong enough to pull investment out of the banks into agribusiness. So I want to make 3 specific proposals. One is that the request that we have been making over the years for government to apply a 1% tax on imports of all food products and establish an R&D fund, 60% of which would remain in the countries for R&D at national level, 40% to go to regional organizations like Cardiff, for example, or the university. 2, that to unlock the funds in the bank, because although much was said about establishing these funds, we have not identified how we are going to be financed, where the funds are going to come from in a consistent and sustainable manner. So we don't want to suggest that government apply a policy that requires the bank to invest 5% of their investment funds in the agribusiness sector, and to do so by incentivizing them with much lower taxes on such investment. Thirdly, we don't want to suggest that in terms of the need for having a consistent approach to attracting investment, that support be provided to the Caribbean Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, which have now brought agriculture onto the agenda, to have a consistent approach to attracting investment in the sector, whether it's at the SME level, or I think a point was made about attracting foreign investment. They are now proposing to have an investment summit in, I think, October during the week of agriculture. And the major constraint of that is the absence of bankable investment proposal to take to potential investors. I think we need to look at that as one of the mechanisms that we can use to attract investment. None of this is going to change. We'll come back here saying the same things we've been saying in the last 30 years. If we don't find a strategy to attract investment in a sustainable way in the sector, and fundamentally it's about the right policies. The policies we have are not strong enough to attract funding that are sitting in the banks all across the region into the sector. So we don't want to suggest, Chairman, and we can provide you with these proposals in writing, and we'd like to have the opportunity to pursue this discussion with the development agency, in particular, how they can help us to develop the bankable investment proposal for this seminar in October, because that's what is lacking. We'd want to engage in the discussion with Minister Pintard, because I found his presentation particularly interesting. That could probably be scaled up to be taken across the region, and as well as a presentation from Jamaica. So I'll stop here, Chair, but I look forward to sending you these proposals, and hopefully we will have, coming out of this discussion, some mechanism, maybe a small team that is going to take this thing forward. Many of these are discussions that we have. At the end, there's no mechanism to take it forward. And I'm hoping that that's not going to be the case in this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vassell. Before we move into the general audience, most of you would be aware of the challenges that our member states, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, would have suffered as a result of the eruption of the volcano. And I think we have P.S. Gittins on with us. I would ask P.S. Gittins to give us a few thoughts before we move into the other section. P.S. Gittins, if you're still here with us, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, my time, everybody. A lot of what I wanted to say has been said, but I wish to add to all of that, especially for our situation in terms of the volcanic eruptions have made things even clearer and more pronounced than was previously acknowledged. We know that we had the eruptions, and it has brought to mind our emphasis or lack thereof that we have on youth involvement in agriculture. So the question is, how do we utilize whatever available resources we have to bring youth on board, to see agriculture as a business, as a means of earning a living? How do we utilize whatever is available in terms of innovation, digitization, for entrepreneurship? How do we introduce the blue economy as an alternative to farming? As the young lady from Barbuda said earlier, you'd see agriculture as it is currently being sold as old-fashioned. And if the elder individuals in farming are moving out, then how do we attract youth? And I wish to suggest, as the brother from Trinidad said, the younger individual, is that we introduce agriculture in schools at a much earlier stage of the game. And thus there shall be, in my estimation, greater appreciation for so that we don't wait until they are at university to try to figure out what is going on. And we would have a much easier time having to sell agriculture to them. How do we utilize data in terms of getting it research, getting our research, science and research innovation for what we do? I think if we're going to attract a younger cohort where unemployment is so high, we need to think of different methodologies and encourage the individuals. Capital, all individuals have, almost all have spoken about capitalizing the farming sector. The only thing they do not ask for at the moment is a blood test, because all other things, all the other requirements are so high that youth in particular don't have the means of getting there, and so they just let it pass by. What I wish to say in closing is that we have shown this morning for all those individuals who are listening that we have the ideas. We know what we want. We know how we wish to get there. But what we don't have, or what we are known for in the Caribbean, is to have a lot of lovely speeches as we are doing currently. What we are not known for is bold implementation. I'm adding bold from the Guyana minister there. What we don't normally do is to have bold implementation. So when are we going to take on these, make these bold moves so that we can have the implementation in collaboration with our regional and international partners? Until we actually implement and the tangibles that individuals can see, I'm not convinced that a lot is going to change. And until we can change a lot, our trade and development in the region, and thus our economies, would continue to remain stagnated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, PS. I'm gonna move into the general discussion, but I'm gonna ask Ms. Alafia Samuels from the University of the West Indies, professor that is, to give us a few thoughts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to all, and protocols being observed. I would just like to spend a couple of minutes looking at nutrition security. We have been talking a lot about food security, but really the whole idea of nutrition for our citizens is that we want healthy citizens for sustainable development. And the CARICOM heads of government have recognized the importance of the non-communicable diseases epidemic. Maisha Hutton from Healthy Caribbean Coalition really has laid out the basis for our approaches. We just want to remind us that in the Caribbean, we have the highest rate of premature mortality from non-communicable diseases in the region of the Americas. So for example, in Guyana, the proportion of their population between 30 and 70 years, which is the productive years, the proportion of that society that dies from these diseases at this age is 4 times higher than it is in Canada. So we are losing our people early, and we're losing them in their productive years. And the main reason for this is our unhealthy diets. And yes, we are talking about import substitution and 25 by 25. But if you examine that initiative, you will notice that there is a lot of local production of primary products to replace import of primary products. And that's very good for the economy of the country, but it really doesn't do anything for the health status of the country. The proportion of ultra-processed foods that we import that are contributing to this premature mortality continues to increase. Our import bill is skyrocketing. Everybody has said that. But what is in that import? A lot of it is ultra-processed foods. And we need to recognize that even when we produce, we need to produce a lot more agricultural products. I agree with everything that has been said. But we also need to recognize that there are winds that are actually opposing us in terms of marketing of unhealthy foods to persons. So we all know of persons who can afford to eat healthy, but they don't. And a good part of the reason why they don't is very aggressive marketing from some aspects of the food sector that are promoting unhealthy diets and promoting ultra-processed foods. We also need to recognize that persons of the lower socioeconomic strata in our countries are worst affected by this NCD epidemic. They are least able to afford healthy foods. They eat a lot of ultra-processed foods. So there's also a question of the quality of those foods and the need for reformulation, which connects back to Maisha Hutton's earlier statement about the need for front of package labels, so that poor people can easily see which foods they are buying, which are unhealthy for them. So I think we need to look at the historical development of our dietary patterns as they are now, because we had a traditional pattern. We are now into ultra-processed foods with fast foods and all of that. Why is that? Do we think that just producing more agricultural products is going to reverse that? I don't think so. We need to deal upfront with the risk from ultra-processed foods. And in that regard, the issues of front of package labeling, taxation, and regulations, we need to do that as a partner intervention to go with the agricultural production to improve the nutrition security of our populations and to reduce our premature mortality, make people healthier and more productive for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alafia. We'll move into the general audience now, and I'm going to say it by order of, I'm going to ask you to respond by order of which you're called. Milton Horton, I think is the CEO of CRFM. I see Bibi Ali, Dunstan Demi, and Dunstan Demille. Proceed accordingly.
Chairman, thank you very much, and thanks also to the excellent presentations by the various distinguished panelists and also the commentators. Chairman, I work with the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, and I thank you for the opportunity to say something on behalf of fishers, both the fishing industry as well as the government fisheries operations. The fisheries and aquaculture subsector currently plays a major role in food and nutrition security globally, as well as in the region. We must therefore ensure that this subsector is recognized and promoted as one of the pillars for a resilient food system at the summit. And this is given the fact that fish and seafood are good and nutritious food. They are high in key micronutrients. They're easily accessible to local coastal communities. Fish is relatively easy to harvest, process, store, and transport. And as several panelists alluded to, we need to ensure that food from the extensive marine space under our sovereignty and jurisdiction, as well as our inland water bodies, are fully included in the summit and its outcomes. But we also need to begin to strategize and lay the foundation to access and take advantage of opportunities for food from the high seas, that is an area beyond national jurisdiction. This is a massive area that is available to us that we have really not even been looking at up until now. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we need to ensure that specific action areas for meaningfully addressing the needs of fisheries and aquaculture in small island developing states like ours, that these are expressly provided for in the summit outcome. So going forward, there are a few key areas that I think we ought to be looking at and ensuring that they are adequately addressed. And one is improving understanding of the contribution of fisheries, in particular, small-scale fishing and aquaculture operations to food and nutrition security. Second is implementing national and regional policy, legal, and institutional reforms to improve efficacy and resilience of our aquatic food systems. And this must include according and formally recognizing rights to small-scale fishers and fish farmers over the resources on which they rely for their sustenance and livelihoods. And thirdly, reducing vulnerability and increasing resilience of our small-scale fishers and fishing communities to climate change, ocean acidification, warming waters, and changing ocean dynamics, which is affecting our ecosystem, our marine ecosystems. We also need to address adding value to the harvest and production of small-scale operators, including product development and expanding trade opportunities. Fifthly, ensuring greater participation of our fishers, including our small-scale fishers, in policy and decision-making, and strengthening management and conservation of our aquatic ecosystems and fish stocks through evidence-based decision-making. And this includes eradicating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, as well as transnational organized crime in the fishing industry. And fourth and finally, building partnerships to provide the necessary technical and financial support and access to technology and knowledge to enhance our country's ability to develop and manage our own fisheries. So we can't continue to rely the extent we are on external parties to help us with management. We need to get the technology and knowledge. And finally, I just want to say we need to consider the opportunities for enhanced contribution of fisheries and aquaculture to regional and global food system. The opportunities are tremendous. There are challenges, but these challenges can be dealt with. They can be addressed, and I do hope that we are able to put together specific actions that will deal with these and help us to overcome the challenges and move forward to realize the full potential of the massive ocean space that we have and the significant living marine resources that we have available for food and nutrition security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CEO Horton. We'll now move to, I see, Bibi Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you for giving me the chance to speak and to share a few thoughts here. It's been great to see so many distinguished CARICOM leaders interested in the summit and to hear all of the presentations, in particular that of my own president, President Ali. I'm a former Caribbean diplomat, and I currently work with the private sector, and I also sit on the leadership team of one of the action tracks. So I wanted to just share a few points from where I sit that I think are important for the region. Right now, as we've seen in the last year, our food systems are not resilient. And what we need is a resilient food system that advances livelihoods, nutrition, health, diversity, and of course, the environment. This summit is the first time in 25 years that the UN is addressing the issue. And so what we agree on now is going to influence the way the global food system evolves in the coming years. Critical to a transformed food system is the need to address rural multidimensional poverty. Our rural communities in the region are often the backbone of our agricultural sector. And oftentimes it has been shocking actually to learn that most of the time, the rural populations are the ones, even though they produce our food, they make up large numbers of the world's hungry. And of course, they are large numbers of the world's poor. So we wanted to, I think it's important to encourage governments and all stakeholders, including the private sector, to address these many varying layers of disadvantages that are faced by the rural populations, including poverty, hunger, oftentimes lack of access to healthcare, lack of infrastructure, and in particular, digital telecommunications connectivity. There's a great need to ensure and create access to formal markets, for example, for smallholders in particular. And this, of course, also leads into the topic of livelihoods. And quite a few of the previous speakers have just touched on two of the key elements of that of women and youth. Now, in order for us to attract more investment and to attract youth and more people into agriculture, you know, we have to make it possible for them to have a living income. More than often, we have seen people consider agriculture something that only the poor do. And that's something, this is a moment that we have an opportunity to shift, to create that transformational shift in thinking. You know, if we need to, again, it has to be multi-stakeholder, but we need to have and create systems and policies and an environment in place where all actors in the food and agriculture value chain can create a living income. And towards that end, currently right now in Action Track 4, you would have seen, many of you would have seen that the action tracks, the Food System Summit's action tracks have advanced their second report on game changers that are being advanced towards the pre-summit. And right now, there is a game changer that has been advanced on creating a coalition on living incomes. You know, that's something, if there is interest, I would be more than happy to share further information on and to speak with anyone who would be interested on that. But it is something that I think it's important, creating living incomes for our actors in the food and agriculture value chain is quite important, I think, for the region. The last thing I just wanted to point out is that a diversified food system is a resilient food system. And so I think we do need to recognize the contribution and to involve all of the actors, such as, you know, small and medium and large enterprises across a broad cross-section of crops, livestock, horticulture, agroforestry, fisheries, all of this. And this, of course, will improve not only our environmental outcome, but also our economic, social, and the nutritional outcomes that we so desperately desire. Thank you again to everyone. And this has been really, really a great discussion that CARICOM has hosted today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We move to Dunstan DeMille. I'll ask if we could just, we had projected to finish at once. I'm going to ask if we could keep the interventions a little shorter. Then we go to Java, Seeley, and then Claire Nelson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me thank everybody for the presentation so far. I think it was really, really good because I remember sometime in 2014, when I did a presentation at CARICOM and I asked the ministers of agriculture then, what is it going to be? Are we going to keep building larger hospitals or are we going to address food nutrition? So this is right up my alley. I'm so happy now we're looking at, you know, how we're going to deal with food nutrition to also in scaling up our agricultural production. The political will we spoke about, and also I know we had the CARICOM food dietary guidelines, you know, that I know probably a number of the islands have not implemented. Let's think of prettier larceny. Since COVID, that has been a huge, huge issue. Let's think of that. We also need to think of our market intelligence. And I like the discussion around the value added. And I know Vasil is there. I know that's right up his alley also. The focus on funding, energy, you know, water, I think it's correct. And we will not go wrong there. Our new approaches, we have to have new approaches that people understand. Let's not complicate things. Also, I think one of the areas we can look at is having mentors in agriculture. We also have a number of success stories in agriculture in the region, which we could start highlighting. I mean, soil management, sustainable production, the regional trade, all those are important issues that we need to keep dealing with, right? Let's not reinvent the wheel. A number of times I see we do that, we reinvent the wheel. Let's learn to share. If we share, we become stronger. Together we go further. Let's look at some of the best practices. Let's look at how we could make sure we have a CARICOM land use policy, because in our country, we're losing our agricultural lands. We need to take some of those things serious so that we can have the land available for the production. Let's move into the new technologies. And also, guys, if the pandemic taught us one thing, is that a number of countries were keen on the food security, because as a large buyer, Massey stores, there were things we were ordering and they would not send it because their country come first. So let that be a lesson for us. And we now put ours in place to see how we could better our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dunstan. Claire Nelson? No, I had Java Seeley first, then Claire Nelson, then Torres, and I think that would be it for the Q&A. Proceed.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so kindly. I would like to first acknowledge all the distinguished ministers and distinguished brothers and sisters of the Caribbean community. I'm Java Seeley. I'm the CARICOM Youth Ambassador to Barbados, and at 22 years old, it is really heartwarming to have this conversation, especially knowing what the region has been through with regard to its food security. But I would like, this fantastic conversation shows us just how well we know the problems that have plagued us and the solutions that we have available. But I want to speak very quickly to my observations on marketing and the indirect role of young people in the reformation of the ideal food system. And I'm cognizant of the desired finish time. And in that regard, I intend to be very brief. And now I'm going to use a personal anecdote. So I'm very fortunate to live with both grandparents, one who grew up in the heart of town, the other who grew up in the heart of the country. And in listening to their stories and lived experiences growing up, my perspective on our relationship with food has become a lot clearer and more defined. And I can expose that they weren't well off, which affected their diet. But the legacies of growing up in that time period has lasted throughout their lives and their children's. And so it is no secret that in some parts of Barbados and undoubtedly in some parts of the region, there was a relative stigma being forced to eat, a diet complete with more vegetables than meat, if we're going to focus on, vegetables, because of the scarcity and inability to provide for the larger families that were characteristic of the day. And now I understand that this is a regional food systems dialogue, but while the conversation can focus on the agricultural sector, it can still focus outside of the vacuum, because at the center of any agri-food system is people. And so in the Barbadian context, a culture of entrepreneurship has become somewhat more natural among young persons in the Barbadian context, especially those interested in agriculture. But as with everything, there are some limitations, particularly in having agriculture be just as efficient as any other enterprise, because agribusiness is still business. And so I want to speak very quickly to the culture of convenience that still fuels a lot of the food choices, which are made by persons of all ages throughout all parts of society in the Barbadian context. And we can continue to work with or try to regulate the way people eat, but those efforts will be futile without influencing how persons want to eat. And it can't go without saying that we in the region have fallen prey to the food influences which we have been exposed to from global and particularly foreign media, as Honorable Prime Minister Mia Motley would have mentioned, which might not promote a culture of moderation or even dependence on more whole foods. And I want us to look at these things not in a silo, as when most persons eat their national dishes, most young people eat their national dishes in this context, what would be considered more local food from a cook shop or restaurant around the world. They do it for nostalgic purposes or for those of identity, some of which are unhealthy, others which do wonders for the body, but all in moderation. And so long story short, in contribution to this meaningful dialogue, creating a more organic connection between what the ideal foods are and the choices that people make as consumers is going to be critical to achieving our ideal food systems, whilst achieving simultaneously SDGs 1, 2, 10, 12, and 13. A more organic relationship between producing food and better marketing food that we're capable of sustainably producing, which is more nutritious than what we're consistently consuming, is critical. And so I'm very heartened to hear the solutions and the actionable items, because it remains true that as a young person, I'm more exposed to global options that render any dietary choice within my reach, as I understand my power as a consumer. And so with that said, they're more like me, some less conscious of the system which makes their decisions for them. But this knowledge should allow us to exploit the opportunities that we now have to market these goods to ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Java. All right, we move to Claire Nelson.
Thank you for the opportunity. I hope you're hearing me. I'm Dr. Claire Nelson. I'm president and founder of the Institute of Caribbean Studies in Washington, D.C. Since 2014 or 2013, I can't remember when, we have been organizing annually a Farm the Future conference in Washington, D.C. to engage the various U.S. organizations along with people from the region. We have been talking to CARICOM over the years, CARDI and CABA in particular, and I really had less challenge in getting other people to the table, like the farmers networks and the other people I've heard on the call earlier. Needless to say, I'm excited that this summit is happening. It's kicking off something that we've been talking about, specifically the need for a shared vision, which we have a lot of talk, but no action, and partly because we don't have a shared vision and shared framework in which to ensure that the civil society actors, which tend to be small and weak, are able to continue working on the ground. To that end, I've been speaking in the last 3 months with the University of the West Indies Agriculture Department to create something called a Smart Agriculture Collaboratory. And we want to use the next 4 months leading up to the Caribbean Week of Agriculture to get this started. So I certainly hope that IICA and the funding agencies here will be able to support us in this effort. We want to bring back together all of the civil society actors I've heard speak today to have more detailed deep dive into action plans that are actually actionable, with targets, with a dashboard that's public, that will hold us honest and true to what we say we're going to do, so that the farmers and the people who are fed up of hearing us talk, we see that we mean business by making it more visible. The prime ministers have spoken about this. All the ministers of agriculture have spoken about it. And I think for the first time at last, maybe thanks to COVID, there's a renewed excitement in the sector. So I want to invite you all to look out for events that we're doing in June in Caribbean American Heritage Month. We are the conveners of that process. We have been putting in our documents to the US State Department and to the US Congress a section on agribusiness. Let me tell you straight up that right now, USAID does not see agriculture as a sector for investment in a region. We need your support. We're trying to support you with our advocacy, but we need you to come to the table, and we ask to strengthen our voice here as diaspora who vote for Congress, that makes the laws, that creates the budget that comes out in US State Department and USAID. So please, those of you in civil society, if you would like to get engaged, if you want to understand how certainly the US foreign policy and US foreign support works, and want to strengthen US engagement in the agriculture sector, agribusiness sector, to farm the future from soil to table, right? From water to land, please be in touch with us. And Mr. Ball has my information and Kaba has my information, and we'd love to have you participate more robustly in June to kick off what we're doing. And some of my notes are in the chat. Please read them, and I also post my email in there as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Okay, I'll allow 2 more, Jair Torres and also Christopher. Your last name is not visible. Christopher, I hope I pronounce it Chipu. I hope I pronounce it properly. And those will be the last 2, and we'll close out from there. Go ahead, Mr. Mr. Torres. Not sure if it's a male or female.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for all the presentations and all the great ideas that were shared today. I'm Jair Torres from the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction from the Americas and the Caribbean, and I just want to make a very short comment, because I know that we are over the time. So the first comment that I wanted to make is concerning the way how food systems are really exposed to multiple hazards. And these multiple hazards sometimes interact, in a single or in a cluster, or even in cascading effects, creating major challenge for the food systems, including food security. So the first comment that I want to hear to the consideration of the whole dialogue is that food systems should take into consideration systemic risk. COVID-19 was a good example about how a specific hazard that didn't have anything to be in relation with food systems actually impacted the food systems in the Caribbean region enormously, as we see. The second point that I wanted to leave to this dialogue is that it's very important to have insurance. Many people have been mentioning this, to how to insurance and how to link this insurance with climate forecasting. And we believe that this is very pertinent, but also they need to be seen as a complementary way, because the main role is not only to work on risk transfer, but also on risk reduction, and on risk reduction within those food systems. And nowadays, there are many, and many people has mentioned it during the conversation today, there are many techniques, there is many science, there is many innovations that can help to make more resilient these food systems. So in order that we can reduce the risk in the food systems, rather than only doing a risk of transfer because when we do transfer of risk at the end, we are not securing food security. So that is the comment that I wanted to mention on that. And on that, there is particular attention that needs to be taken into account for early warning systems. Early warning systems and impact-based forecasting that can be integrated on agricultural practices in order to protect crops, to protect the necessities of for food in the region. So just to finalize, I would like to invite you all that in part of this dialogue, we need to approach the challenge of food systems with a systemic risk lens. So let's secure a systemic approach, notably in the governance of these systems. And that means that the food institutions or those institutions that has been working on food systems needs to open the way of collaborating with other institutions as well as with other organizations in order to see the systemic way of approaching food system with the systemic lens view. So that is my invitation, and I'm really thank you to be part of this dialogue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to have these small interventions.
Thank you much. Christopher?
Hi, good morning, everyone. And again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me. Is Christopher Chinapu is the name. And I part of Impact Youth Sustainability Jamaica. And what is happening is that we, with the Jamaica Network of Rural Women Producers and others, have recently convened 8 food system summit dialogues. And a lot of the solutions that were actually, problems that were posed and challenges that have been posed by the various speakers have actually been answered by many of our farmers and agro-processors and others who have actually come together in those dialogues and actually answer those questions. But those feedback is actually on the food system summit. But I just wanted to mention a few areas that I think is of particular importance and that can help this conversation. Apart from the issue of the food, energy, water, and waste management nexus and the connection of health to food outcomes through the provision and the need for more nutritious provision of food. When we talk about the issue of funding and scaling funding, I think one of the things that we have not heard mentioned, but is of critical importance to our farmers around the region, was this whole issue of sustainable procurement at the local level and local scale. And including, when we talk about the sustainable procurement, it was actually linked to programs such as the social protection that is provided in relation to COVID, sustainable procurement in relation to the school programs, and sustainable procurement in relation to government. And a lot of it spoke to actually maximizing and capitalizing on not only local food production, but also the regional food production, looking at the region basically as a platform for development. The other issue relating to the issue of funding also spoke to the issue of the need to review the risk measures that are associated with agriculture and agricultural funding within the region, the funding that's provided by banks and others, even whether it be grant funding, donor funding, in loans, or even insurance. There was a need to look at the risk measures and also to sort of tailor them to suit the needs of the farmers directly. What was felt is that a lot of the funds and arrangements that are actually structured to actually provide support to our farmers are not, and smallholder farmers especially, are not tailored in such a way to allow for true access of the farmers. The other issue had to do with climate risks. We had a number of polls during those dialogues, and climate risks and the systemic nature of the climate risk actually was the number one issue, again, kind of tying also into the finance. But we also recognize, coming out of a recent study from developmental DevEx, was that of all of the climate finance funding that is available to farmers and smallholder farmers globally, only 1.8% of that actually gets to the smallholder farmers. So what we recognize is that there is a significant amount of financing that is actually available, but it does not actually find its way to the smallholder farmers and to the processors. So we need to actually develop systems to enhance the capability of our farmers and others to actually work together to better capitalize on that finance in terms of from the adaptation, mitigation, and resilience perspective. The better technical support is definitely tied into that. And the need to now have partnerships, and partnerships not only within the context of, I've heard a lot about the private sector and the private sector. What was also emphasized, I know.
No, go ahead, Chris, man. I'm not muting you. I'm just asking if you could just wrap up for us.
Yeah, so the partnerships with the university and is also important, and other arms of the civil society and finance is also part of that critical area. There are just two other issues I want to actually raise quickly. The whole issue of quality and safety of food and the need for regional standards associated with that from the organics and so on. And the other issue is just data and technology. As we talk about making agriculture more attractive, we felt that technology was a means of actually integrating technology into the food system as a means of making agriculture sexy for the youth and women. And when we talk about that too, is again linking it to the whole issue of climate risk from the resilience standpoint. So those are just some of the comments that I wanted to make at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you much, Chris. I see I've heard Leonardo Agaro, who has said that he wants to make a quick intervention. Leonardo, forgive me, I'm giving you 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just my quick comment is to ask for policy initiatives which would clear up some of the major contradictions in agriculture. I think Professor Samuels pointed out to the influx of foods which are associated with the health burdens, and at the same time, you have situations where you're trying to produce healthy foods, and having those two systems in direct competition with each other. I think that's something that needs to be cleared up. And the other thing, I think maybe Dunstan DeMille made mention to it. You want to produce more food, but at the same time, I don't think for most of the smaller Caribbean territories, the land is available, the arable land is available. So this is something I think maybe which is a contradiction in the system, and we need to clear up. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, honorable ministers, honorable participants, partners, farmer organizations, civil society. It's left for me to tell you thank you for participating. I want to say thanks to our partner and sister entities that made it possible. I make special mention of the FAO through the regional leadership of Dr. Clark, Renata Clark. Make special mention of IICA through Kurt DeLuce and Wilmot Garnett, sorry, the World Food Program. I make special reference of the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, Didier and his team in particular. Make mention to the chair, my team here within the Secretariat, and even more importantly, our audience who came, who listened, who stayed with us. I think it's important. It shows seriousness, it shows resoluteness towards the problem at hand. It shows that we are now moving into the solutions phase. The report will be made available with the positions, and I must put forward that it's not a report where it will say she said that, he said this. It is the concrete solutions that we'll be bringing to the summit that will be put forward and will be made available. It will put on place on the respective websites for our region to see, for you to look at and also comment on also. I want to wish you all a beautiful day. What remains on a productive weekend. Please remember to stay safe. We still have the pandemic with us. And just rest assured that all partners who are here, we are resolute, we are serious, we are committed to developing our food system summit. I want to thank the Honorable ministers who participated, and of course, His Excellency President Ali, and also Prime Minister Mia Mottley. Thank you once more, and I'll close by saying thank you and thank you. You will hear more from us, as this is not the end, and we're committed to the process. Thank you much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean.